Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
The gynecology department was noisy as always. Women were chatting among themselves, sharing horror stories and stories from their lives, strung themselves up to the limit. Beatrice worked in gynecology for the second year and still could not get used to it. No matter how many times you explained to patients that you should listen only to the doctor and adhere to his recommendations, because all cases are different, although they may be similar in symptoms, and still there are women who do the opposite. Today she had to comfort a young girl who was suffering. It even came down to sedatives, and all because the neighbor in the ward, you see, said that with such a disease she will never have children. Barely calmed the patient, cited in opposite examples, and so almost every day. Not only that, as a rule, women are very afraid of the upcoming procedures, and you need to be patient to calm them down. But nevertheless, even though it was not easy, Beatrice loved her job very much. She had dreamed of becoming a doctor since she was a child, like her late grandmother. But she failed her university exams and went to medical school. She graduated with a red diploma, additionally studied medical literature and got a job in the gynecological department as a nurse. She was praised for her diligence and care for the patients, although at first they laughed at the tall, rosy-cheeked newcomer with a long blonde braid. She was so different from all the nurses, she hardly wore any makeup, wore modest clothes, mostly dresses. She didn't go to parties with the girls, she didn't like clubs and noisy gatherings. She was even considered wild. All the matter is that Beatrice grew up in the village, in a simple family with her mother. Her father died early, the girl was not yet 3 years old. Mum worked hard as a milkmaid. They kept a huge farm, a vegetable garden. The harvest was always excellent. It was taken out to sell on the highway. That's how they lived. By village standards, Beatrice grew up a beauty, strong, ruddy, blood and milk. She tried not to be lazy. She helped her mum, but she didn't want to stay in the village after school. There were no grooms here, and no job prospects. Beatrice loved her mother very much, felt sorry for her, but still her idol and role model was their late grandmother, a therapist. She devoted her whole life to treating patients, and from childhood instilled in her granddaughter a love of medicine. Already being retired, her grandmother moved to live in the village and was in charge of the local paramedic station. Her fellow villagers still spoke of her with respect. So Beatrice decided to follow in her footsteps and become a doctor. And from her grandmother she was left a small, modest one-bedroom on the outskirts of the city. That's where the girl lived. Mum visited whenever possible and missed her very much. And 6 months ago, Beatrice fell in love for the first time in her life, so much so that she did not recognize herself. She and Thomas had met by chance at the clinic. They were both being examined and standing in a queue. Somehow they got to talking. Beatrice helped the young man she liked to find the right offices, and he invited her for coffee. They were of very different backgrounds. Thomas came from a well-to-do family, a fortunate man. His mother had a fancy beauty parlor famous throughout the city. Beatrice was a simple nurse, and yet, the two of them were so happy together. A real fire of passion was lit between them. Thomas was enamored of her long hair, which fell like a waterfall over her shoulders. He was always saying that she had a great figure, that she had everything going for her. This was surprising to Beatrice. She did not consider herself a beauty at all. On the contrary, she was even embarrassed by her tall stature and, as she thought, overly rounded forms. To her, Thomas was better than any other guy in the world. He seemed so solid, spoke beautifully, looked at her so boldly. He gave her baskets of flowers and greeted her after duty. The nurses were surprised and envious of Beatrice. They all joked. What a quiet girl. Such a fiancé she found, all pretending to be modest. And what did that fellow find in her? Not a woman, but a horse. The day before yesterday, she dragged a patient herself on a gurney. What a power. Beatrice was flying on wings with love. She dreamed of marriage and a strong family, forgetting all about caution, and recently she learnt that she was pregnant. This news shocked her. Anxiety and joy, excitement, all mixed up. The girl was worried about how her fiancés would react, if he would be frightened. But to her joy, Thomas only smiled. "Why are you crying? I won't leave you, don't be afraid. I wasn't planning to take care of the children, to be honest. But now that it's happened, I have to get married as soon as possible. But I don't know how to tell my mother. I can imagine what a scandal that would be. Well, she'll shout and calm down. She loves me, so she'll accept you." Beatrice calmed down, hugged her fiancé. Now everything will be all right. But, as it turned out, she rejoiced too soon. Megan was not happy about the news at all. She scolded her son, discouraged him from getting married. Not the kind of daughter-in-law she dreamed of. All the more so because she'd long ago agreed in absentia with old friends that Thomas and their daughter Brooke would marry and the business would grow faster. And now a nurse from the village had confused all the cards. And today Beatrice was in for another surprise. Near the end of the shift, a patient was admitted to the ward. A routine case, nothing special, but it was her future mother-in-law. She was oohing and ahhing and holding her stomach. The girl immediately approached her. "Mrs. Megan, what's wrong with you? We just visited you the day before yesterday. Everything was fine. You didn't seem to be complaining of feeling unwell. What happened?" The woman made a mournful face and replied, "I've been ill for a long time. I just haven't told anyone. And now it's just come on. I guess I'm not doing well. I won't be long. You go, Beatrice, I'm not well. We'll talk later." The girl didn't understand. Not long ago, Megan was in perfect health, joking with the guests. Now she's almost dying. Is that what happens? She sincerely wanted to help her future mother-in-law and make sense of it all. Beatrice also wondered why the groom's mother didn't go to a private clinic. She had enough money. And Thomas had never said that his mum was ill. A young doctor, Mr. Oliver, was appointed as Megan's doctor. They took all sorts of tests, did an ultrasound, and did a thorough examination. The picture was more than vague. The patient complained of regular bleeding, weakness, loss of appetite, lower abdominal and lower back pain, but the analyses showed the exact opposite. Beatrice realized that her mother-in-law was feigning illness, and not very skillfully at that. When there was no one else in the room, she spoke quietly on the phone and walked briskly back and forth. The door of the ward was open, and Beatrice saw this strange picture several times. But as soon as the nursing staff entered, she immediately oohed, moaned, and complained of feeling unwell. The girl couldn't stand it and told her fiancé all about it in the evening. "Thomas, I'm sorry, but your mother is obviously faking. Her analyses are quite normal, and such pains can't be. And besides, she eats everything with gusto when no one's looking. I'm sorry, I've been looking at what's going on. Maybe you can explain something to me. Why did your mother have to go to the hospital in such a hurry? The doctor has already decided to convene a concilium. He doesn't understand anything either. You understand, the truth will come out anyway." The groom fidgeted, his eyes ran round. He began to justify himself. "Well, yes, you're right. Mum isn't ill at all. It just had to be that way, you know. I don't say anything to anyone yet. I'll explain everything to you later." Beatrice was even more confused and didn't know what to do. The doctor appointed a concilium, as he couldn't even decide on the treatment protocol. The picture of the disease didn't coincide with the analyses. The young woman walked into her future mother-in-law's room and said firmly, "Mrs. Megan, I don't know why you're doing this, but it's a concilium today. It's obvious you're not telling the truth. Why are you faking a serious illness? Either you tell me the truth, or I'm sorry, I'll have to tell the doctor everything." The woman fussed and began to wail. "I beg you, don't give me away. We need to stall for time. Think of something, I don't know, some more examinations. I borrowed a huge amount of money from a man. I said that for treatment, that I was terminally ill. I can't just get better in a week. He wouldn't believe me. I'm not doing this for me, by the way. Thomas lost money at the casino, so I'm trying to help him out, and you stay out of his way." Beatrice looked at her with wide eyes. "Lost in what way? What casino? Why don't I know anything about it? How long has he been gambling?" Megan waved her hand. "What a bride. You're getting married and you don't know anything about your fiancé. You've got a lot of surprises in store for you. Now go. I don't have time for you now. I hope you understand. If you give me away before my time, there will be no wedding. Do you understand?" Beatrice had never been in such a predicament before. She thought feverishly whether she should do the right thing or help her future mother-in-law for the sake of her own future. The girl decided to speak to the doctor and informed him. "Mr. Oliver, let's adjourn the consultation. The patient insists on a CT scan. She has the right. And then according to the results. And then we'll do it. The decision, of course, is yours. As you say, so it will be." The doctor hesitated. "And you are probably right. Let's do it that way. Often this precise examination reveals problems that even analyses can't identify. I'll write out a referral now. It's a strange case. I've never seen anything like this before. The clinic is blurred. The analyses are contradictory." After the examination, Mr. Oliver called Beatrice into the resident's room. "You were right, Beatrice. Look at this. Look at where that sore is. You couldn't see it on the ultrasound. We need to start serious treatment right away. We'll do it again. It's all clear to me now." Mrs. Megan was indignant and reprimanded Beatrice like a schoolgirl. "What are you talking about? What serious illness? I'm perfectly healthy. What did I ask you to do? To stall for time, not to give me diseases. Is this some kind of joke?" Beatrice explained, "You know what? You don't have to talk to me like that. Thank you. You should have told me that if we start treatment now, everything will be fine. If you don't believe me, ask the doctor yourself. I've got to go. I've got a lot to do. I'm waiting for your injection." The patient was cursing to herself. "Look at the way she's talking, the country bumpkin. What did Thomas see in her? But nothing. I'll be cured and I'll have a wedding. It'll be a big deal." The patient was discharged a fortnight later. Everything went well, the disease was cured. But the woman herself was not happy about it because her plan had failed. She was afraid that the creditor will realize that she made it all up. Relations between Beatrice and Thomas also began to deteriorate. The girl scolded him, begged him not to play anymore. After all, they have a family. The child will soon be. The husband swore that he would no longer play, but more and more often came home in the morning with red, like a rabbit, eyes, all smelling of tobacco and alcohol. Of course, he said he was at an important meeting in a restaurant. But Beatrice knew he was lying again. She consoled herself only by saying that after the wedding and the birth of the child, Thomas would settle down, and her mother had told her that a child held the family together and that things would soon get better. After the discharge, Mrs. Megan suddenly said to Beatrice, "The wedding's coming up and I still haven't met your mother. Tell her to come to the Venice restaurant at 6 o'clock on Saturday. We'll talk about everything there. I'm sick of the hospital walls. I want to get away." Beatrice was taken aback. "Mrs. Megan, why don't we have a family meal at home? I'll cook something nice, bake a cake. My mom doesn't go to restaurants. She's too shy to go there." But the woman sharply parried. "Let her get used to go out in public with her family. And I advise you to take care of yourself and throw away these old-fashioned dresses. You'd better go to my salon. I've got a lot of work to do on you. Your eyebrows are in a different shape now, and you could do with a facial. I don't understand. Thomas doesn't have any eyes at all. Besides, I want to sit down with my matchmaker. We've got a lot to talk about. Or do you think, my dear, that I'm only going to organize a banquet at my own expense?" Beatrice had to agree and called her mum. "Mummy, you know Thomas and I are getting married soon. So the matchmaker wants to invite you to the restaurant. She wants to get to know you, to discuss everything, because it's really not human that you haven't met yet. Will you come?" Mrs. Tiffany began to wail. "Oh, daughter, you're a shocker. I haven't got anything to wear. I haven't been in a place like this in ages." "Well, I'll come for you then." Mrs. Tiffany was very worried. She ran to her neighbor Betty, who was a hairdresser in the village. "Betty, help me out. You are the first fashionista in our village, and you have golden hands. You cut all the young people's hair. My matchmaker wants to meet you at a restaurant for dinner. How can I go? I don't even have a normal dress. I'm ashamed. Even the neighbor got into the situation and immediately began to make a fuss. She put the woman in an armchair and began to go through the available outfits to make her look beautiful. In 2 hours, Mrs. Tiffany did not recognize herself in the mirror. It seems that she even became 10 years younger. Haircut, silk and brown shimmering hair, and no gray. Modest but decent burgundy dress with a beautiful brooch, neat manicure. Mrs. Tiffany was thanking her neighbor. Betty, you're just magic. I have already forgotten when I saw myself like this. All the shawls, turtlenecks, rubber boots. Now I'm not ashamed to go out in public. I'm so worried about how the acquaintance will go. My son-in-law's family is not an easy one. They seem to have a lot of money, but I'm afraid that he will start to bully. They are arrogant, or will demand a lot of money for the wedding. Where are we going to get it from, Beatrice? I've put it aside, but I'm afraid it won't be enough for the restaurant if they go out in style. The neighbor poured the tea into cups and began to soothe. Mrs. Tiffany, don't get yourself worked up before your time. If the young people love each other, they will accept both Beatrice and you. How could they not? You have to get to know each other if you're going to get married, and the grandchildren are coming. It's no time to worry. Go on, don't be afraid of anything. As God wills, so it will be. Break a leg. When you come back, I'll be waiting for you. I'll look after the house and the household. Mrs. Tiffany could hardly find the restaurant and the right table. There was already waiting for her a very spectacular woman in a dazzling open dress and with a fashionable short haircut. She was drinking a cocktail and leafing through the menu. She caught a glimpse of Mrs. Tiffany and said through gritted teeth, "You must be Beatrice's mother." That's what I thought for some reason. Well, sit down. My name's Mrs. Megan, I'm Thomas's mom. So where shall we start? What are you ordering? I recommend the Japanese scallops with foie gras sauce. It's very savory. Or the steamed Kamchatka crab. That's good too. I think I'll have the steak. I love, tasty meat. What's your favorite? Mrs. Tiffany pulled her glasses out of her purse, leafing through the menu. She had never even heard the names of such dishes, and she didn't even know what they were. When she saw how much the delicacies cost, she felt sick. The woman put the menu aside and said, I'm not hungry. I'll have a green tea. I am very pleased that you invited me here. We should have met a long time ago. Our children have grown to love each other. Beatrice has been telling me how wonderful Thomas is. Now she's pregnant. It's so exciting. To think we're almost grandmothers. So we can't wait to get married. Mrs. Megan looked at the matchmaker in silence and thought. Well, yes, rural and squalid. In her hands, are they the hands of a woman? Even a manicure looks ridiculous on them. And her daughter is the same, an awkward little dolt. No, I don't want any relatives like that. I'll give her a fun evening. She'll remember it for a long time. But what a grandmother. No one has ever insulted me like that. The businesswoman smiled pretentiously and replied as if nothing had happened. And who told you, my dear, that there will be a wedding? I didn't call you here for that. Yes, my son had a little crush on a simple girl, and that's all right. But it's just a passing thing. No one even dragged your daughter into bed. She jumped in and out of bed all by herself. And as for the pregnancy, you don't know who gave her the baby. The shocked Mrs. Tiffany was stunned and stood up for her daughter. How dare you mothers say such things to me? By what right do you throw dirt on Beatrice? She's a decent girl. She's never even been to a club. Thomas is her first love and she's pregnant with his child. I know that for a fact. Mrs. Megan laughed angrily. But she's the one in your village playing coy. It's a different life in the city. What do you think I don't know your brazen world? The provincials are only trying to get into rich families once and everything is ready. You get a well-to-do husband and a good life. Besides, she has someone to learn from. Where's your husband? Who's Beatrice's father? That's right. Now I've told you. Either your little girl leaves my Thomas nicely, or I'll disgrace her so badly she'll be out of the hospital with a ticket out of here. I have a lot of connections in the city. You must realize that there is no future between your daughter and my son. Mrs. Tiffany was shocked. She had never been humiliated like this before. She was outraged. "Shame on you. My husband died a long time ago and you've decided to brand me. Well, when you meet such a family, you don't need enemies. Beatrice saved you. She told me you were cured, and this is how you thank her." Mrs. Megan answered angrily. "Saved you, you say? She ruined my whole plan. Now I've got a creditor chasing after me at her mercy. I wish you'd keep your nose out of my business, you benefactress. The evening is over. Farewell. I hope you've understood everything, or shall I repeat it? I'll never recognize this child, and there'll be no wedding. That is the business of the young people. It is not for you to decide. Have a good day. Thanks for the treat. I'm full." Mrs. Tiffany could barely control herself. The woman went to her daughter's house. She was shaking with emotion. When she crossed the threshold of the flat, she could not hold back, cried bitterly, and told Beatrice everything. She was horrified and cried out, "What does Mrs. Megan allow herself? It is beyond the bounds. I put up with her abuse for a long time, but now I won't. I'm going to ring him right now and tell him everything. If she behaves so vilely now, what can I expect from her?" Beatrice dialed her fiancé's number with shaking hands and began to shout into the receiver. "Your mother has gone completely mad. She insulted and humiliated my mom and threw mud on me. I will not tolerate such an attitude. Or do you also think that I'm a slut and the child is not yours? Then why don't we not get married? I can't imagine sitting at the same table with your mother. How will I ever speak to her again?" Beatrice thought Thomas would take her side, make her mother apologize. But another blow awaited her. The groom began to mumble. "Don't shout, Beatrice, there's no need. You already understand Mom is against our wedding. I think the scandal was terrible. I don't know what to do. She's threatening to take away my support, my money, everything. I've been thinking maybe we really did rush the wedding. And I'm not ready to raise kids yet. But are you sure it's my baby? My mom doesn't think it's mine. I don't know. It doesn't seem to be working." Bitter tears flowed down Beatrice's cheeks. She swallowed them and replied, "You're right. With such a scoundrel and Mama's boy, I should not connect my life. I was wrong about you. Oh, how wrong. Goodbye and don't ever call me again. And erase my number. Make your mom happy." Mother and daughter cried for a long time, consoled each other, and thought about what to do now. Beatrice did not allow the thought of abortion. The baby is not guilty of anything, and she was not going to cripple her health. As a medical professional, she realized that she could remain childless forever. She decided that she would raise the child alone. Her mom promised to help her. After all, she was not the first, not the last to be betrayed and abandoned by the man she loved. Rumors immediately spread in the ward that Beatrice had been abandoned with a belly by her rich fiancé. She was squinted at and whispered about behind her back. Some quarrelsome female employees even rejoiced. They said, "We'll know her place, hillbilly." But many sincerely pitied the girl, tried to cheer her up. It was very hard to work in such an environment, and the toxicosis tormented. All the time had a headache, often dizzy, and her eyes were wet. Mom left for the village with a heavy heart, persuaded Beatrice also to return home. The two of us easier to survive such grief. But her daughter firmly decided that she would not give up. And she realized that in the village she would also have a hard time. The ladies will wash all her bones. Say, she went to earn money and came back with nothing, and without a husband, and with a belly. After breaking up with Beatrice, Thomas was at first even relieved. Very much he did not want to plunge into the family routine and everyday life. He imagined how the child would scream at night, not to give sleep, and that the free life would come to an end. He rolled a feast with friends in a restaurant, woke up in the same bed with a strange blonde, but for some reason the morning did not feel any joy. His head was buzzing. He chased the girl away. His soul was nasty and dreary. Guilt was pressing him. He realized that he had acted like a coward and knew for certain that he had been Beatrice's first man and that the child was his. But he had been accustomed from childhood to obey the will of his overbearing mother. She had patronized him, solved all his problems, and completely directed his life. This time he dared not go against her will and did not want to be deprived of the comfort and nourished life. But Mrs. Megan was rejoicing. She made 3 phone calls to everyone she knew. She had warded off the insolent girl who was encroaching on her son and her property. She thought she had done the right thing. Beatrice was no match for Thomas, and she had simply eliminated her. A couple of months passed. Beatrice accepted the situation, even though her life was not sugar. Pregnancy was toxicological. She was exhausted at work. She came in after her shift, and there was no energy for household chores. And there was not much money left. I had only a little to put aside for the birth. One thought only consoled Beatrice, her baby, who was growing up in her tummy. She imagined how she would raise him. And then, when he grows up to walk, play, and in her soul, there would be no room for loneliness and longing. That afternoon, Beatrice walked out of the hospital. Her legs were buzzing after her shift and her eyes were sleepy. It had been a restless night. She had to help heavy patients after surgery. She hadn't been able to sleep for a minute. The girl walked home, and then a pleasant and expensively dressed middle-aged man called out to her. He was holding beautiful, delicate white roses. He held them out to the nurse and introduced himself. "Good afternoon. You are Beatrice Brown, aren't you? These are for you. Here you are. My name is William Taylor. I am the same creditor from whom your failed mother-in-law was hiding in the hospital." Beatrice sighed heavily and answered sadly for the flowers. "Thank you. They are very beautiful, but I just don't understand what occasion you chose to give them to me. I never married, so I'm no longer related to Mrs. Megan either, thankfully. Why have you been waiting here for me?" The man began to explain. "My dear Beatrice, you have unknowingly helped me to uncover a fraud. This swindler came running to me, crying, telling lies about a serious illness and about the operation, begging to borrow a huge amount of money and on the security of the flat. I believed her. It's not unlikely, I thought. Grief is such. We need to help. But she changed her mind about giving it back and started to trick me, to make me feel sorry for her. And when Mrs. Megan was discharged from the hospital, I quickly became suspicious and made inquiries in what department she was lying, with what diagnosis. That's when they told me she was trying to fake it. And you uncovered her deception and treated her side effects. And she spent the money on her son, who happens to be an avid gambler. If I'd known that, I wouldn't have taken that kind of money out of circulation. But now I'm going to make her pay me back every penny in court. I just wanted to thank you, and the flowers are just for good cheer. Thank you, Beatrice, because that clever lady had me fooled. Why don't we go out for a drink on this occasion? I'll buy you something to eat, and we can chat." Beatrice shook her head negatively. "Oh, you know, I'm tired after the night before, and I have to go to the other side of town. I'll go. I dream of only one thing, to sleep. I don't even want to eat." The businessman suggested. "Well then, get in. I'll take you home with a breeze. It's no problem for me. I have the day off today, so I have time." Beatrice was glad and agreed. Out of politeness, she invited William to tea. She began fussing in the kitchen. "Here are the biscuits, the sweets. I'll just change my clothes now because it's very hot." William looked round the flat. It had not been well renovated for a long time. The furniture is old, from Soviet times, but it is clean and cozy. All the things are neatly arranged. A lot of interesting statuettes on the shelves and books, whole collections of writers, classics and medical literature. And in the kitchen there is a familiar set from my childhood, a teapot and cups, red with white polka dots. You don't see such things nowadays. The landlady never showed up. He was tired of waiting for her in the kitchen, so he decided to check where she was. He went into the bedroom and saw that Beatrice had fallen asleep before she had changed her clothes. In the armchair she had her chin resting on her chin, curled up in a funny way. He felt sorry for the tired girl, and seemed to like her. Simple, open. He took a plaid, covered her carefully and quietly went out, leaving his card on the bedside table. A day later he called her again. For some reason Beatrice was overjoyed, so wanted a simple and warm human dialogue. The situation at work was tense, and she didn't want to disturb her mother. Her best friend got married and left for another city, so the girl had no one to talk to. William became her friend. They talked a lot. Beatrice was surprised, seemingly very rich, but so simple in communication. He never judged ordinary people, did not bully the nose. On the contrary, he believed that any labor should be respected, and that everyone should do what he does best and where his soul lies. Beatrice, without lurking, told about her trouble, the police, her fiancé, and her pregnancy, and William told the story of his failed marriage. You know, you and I both seem to have suffered. I don't understand your fiancé. I'd give anything to have children. Honestly, I kept urging my wife to have a baby, but she was literally obsessed with her modeling career. Endless castings, shows, diets, for her figure was above all else. An extra pound caused a terrible panic. She didn't want to hear about pregnancy. She put everything on hold. She and I were different. After the wedding, the passion passed quickly, and it turned out we had nothing to talk about. She wasn't really cut out for cooking and domesticity, and I was tired of eating in restaurants and choking on convenience foods. Linda and I lived parallel lives and eventually divorced. I come from a simple family. My mom was always a role model for me. I saw how she ran the household, how she cared. And of course, I would like a family like that too. Dad's gone now, and Mom misses him a lot. After all, they lived together all their lives. She is ill. She can't get up after a stroke. I'm very worried about her. Because I work all day long, she is alone. A nurse comes to see her. We can't do without it. And you know she does everything well, no complaints. But that's just her job. And Mom suffers from loneliness as it is. And now I have to go away for a couple of days. How can I leave her? I can't imagine. Beatrice suddenly suggested, if you want, I can visit her, stay with her, talk to her. It wouldn't be a problem for me, and it would make you feel better. I'm a nurse, and I can help you if you need it. I know that for many patients, companionship works better than any medicine, especially for the elderly. William was very happy and left with a light heart. Beatrice stayed with Mrs. Cynthia, so as not to have to go back and forth. The girl was prepared for the fact that the patient was bedridden and therefore capricious. She wondered how she could make friends. But her fears were quite in vain. Mrs. Cynthia was very pleasant, kind, smiling. She was so happy to have simple conversations, and asked Beatrice to read aloud to her, as her eyesight was already very poor. She told much about her life and praised the girl. Oh, Beatrice, thank you. There are not many people like you nowadays. Linda had only looked at me a couple of times during her marriage, and then she looked at me with such squeamishness. You're a very nice, helpful woman. I wish my William had such a wife. Then I could die. The girl blushed. Thank you for your kind words. Your son will surely find his happiness, but we can't be together. I'm pregnant with another man's child, it just so happens. So I'm a single mother. Who needs someone else's child? If his own father rejected him, a stranger wouldn't love him. But I'm not discouraged, don't worry. I'll raise the baby myself like my mom raised me. I'll manage. Mrs. Cynthia parried. You shouldn't be so hard on yourself, Beatrice. I know you've been burned and hurt. But believe me, not all men are like that. My William is very kind, and he looks at you in a very special way. I don't think the old woman's out of her mind. I notice everything. The girl's breath caught for some reason. Her heart began to throb, and she hastened to change the subject. Mrs. Cynthia, I'm going to burn up in there now. I'll go and get it. And then we'll have a nice mint tea and chat some more, shall we? Rumors spread around the ward that Beatrice had already found a replacement for her former fiancé, even though she was pregnant. Everyone wondered how she could do it. The nurses whispered, "Look how quick she is. No more crying in the corners. She's settled in well. The rich man meets her often now. I've even seen them in the park together. Beatrice, she's found another." Beatrice was indeed cheerful and cheerful. She had an appetite. Her heart beat faster when William was around. She realized, of course, that they were only friends, but she was glad of that too, for she felt supported. There was someone to turn to for help when trouble struck. She didn't care about the rumors. William himself did not understand what was happening to him. He had only wanted to thank the nurse, nothing more. He hadn't noticed how he'd fallen in love. It was not passion, not lust for a woman. as in Linda's case. On the contrary, it was a kind of pinched tenderness, a desire to protect him, to keep him from all the troubles at once. He was with Beatrice so simple, so comfortable and easy, as with no one and never with anyone. And his mother was attached to the girl, praised her and called her to visit, and was so happy to talk to her. William saw that Beatrice was only braving that she could cope, that she could not cope with anything. But in fact, she was falling off her feet. She was very tired. Saving money to save for the birth and the baby. So the man tried to help her. He wanted to see Beatrice again and again. He didn't reveal his feelings. After all, she had said many times that she no longer believed in men and was really focused on her pregnancy, worried very much about how everything would go. William realized that now was not the moment, not the time, not the place to talk about love. But he had decided for himself that he needed no one but Beatrice. That day, Beatrice's mobile rang. She saw Thomas's number and dialed it. She wasn't even going to talk to him. But then a message came through. "Beatrice, we need to talk urgently. It's a matter of life and death. I'll be waiting for you at our place at 5. The girl racked her brain until the evening. What does Thomas want? Had he come to his senses? Has he decided to reconcile? And what about that obnoxious mum? Has his conscience awakened? What am I supposed to do if she does? Should I forgive her or not? On the one hand, the child needs a father, no matter what, but on the other hand, how can I ever trust Thomas after such humiliation? But Beatrice still went to the meeting. There was still hope in her soul. That Thomas was not a complete bastard. What she heard, however, shocked her. The cheeky man didn't beat round the bush. "Hello. You're looking well. Listen, Beatrice, I heard a rumor that you and Wham Taylor are having a fling. Well, good for you, you're not getting lost. I'm happy for you. I could really use your help. You know, my mama owes Taylor a lot of money, and he's taking us to court, threatening to seize the house. And my mom's case is falling apart. Clients are leaving. We're on the verge of bankruptcy. I wonder if you could put in a good word for my mother. I want you to tell your William to forgive my mother's debt. He's got millions of dollars and he's got a claw in us. What's it worth to you?" Beatrice was breathless at the insolence. So, Thomas thinks she's frivolous, that she could go out with William so easily, and he doesn't give a damn about it at all. So Thomas doesn't care about her at all, and never loved her. It was all in her head. She was so angry. She didn't try to justify herself. What was the point? He wouldn't believe her anyway, she said snidely. "You're a scoundrel, Thomas. I won't even think about it. Your mother will finally get what she deserves. If that's all you've got, then goodbye. I'm in a hurry." The guy suddenly went at her, clenched his fists and hissed. "You bitch, you won't help us. You pretended to be a sheep, and as soon as we parted, you ran to your lover. It must be his baby. Yes, my mother was right to talk me out of this wedding in time. You've been cheating on me with him for a long time, haven't you?" Jealousy, envy, anger clouded Thomas's mind. He didn't know what he was saying. He pushed the girl with all his might onto the pavement. Passers-by gasped, began to indignantly call an ambulance and the police. Thomas immediately ran away cowardly, without even looking round, without even trying to give Beatrice any help. There was a bloodstain underneath her. The girl was taken to the hospital. All night the doctors fought for her pregnancy and defended it. The threat of miscarriage had passed, but Beatrice was forbidden to be nervous or stand up. She was dripped with preservation medication, but she could not stop crying. Tears rolled down her cheeks. The resentment stung. Again, she was humiliated for nothing, literally trampled by the man she loved more than life, whom she was going to marry, the father of her child. It was so horrible. She asked the nurse to get her phone for her. She wanted some distraction. There were a lot of missed calls from William and his mom. Beatrice immediately called back. "I'm at the hospital. I couldn't answer. Sorry." William was almost shouting. "You give me the address at once. I'm coming over right now. God, I'm going mad. You're not at work. You're not at home. You don't answer your phone. My mom's worried too. I think maybe you've gone to her place. Don't cry. I'm on my way. Everything will be fine." Beatrice's heart warmed. It turned out that William was worried, so he cared about her. The very thought made her tears dry. Soon a man came into the room, disheveled and anxious. Carrying a huge bag, he began to arrange everything in the room. "So, here is a noodle soup, still warm. I bought it at the restaurant on the way. And chops. Sit down immediately, you will eat. These things, I don't know your size, I hope I guessed. Slippers, towel, yes, cherries are ripe. Sweet, I've tasted them myself. Make sure you eat, or I'll take offense. I've already talked to the doctor. I'll buy the necessary drugs, don't worry. I'll bring your papers and your exchange card. Mom also told me to buy you some pomegranates. She says they improve your hemoglobin. I bought magazines and crossword puzzles to keep you busy. That's about all." Beatrice burst into tears even more. William was frightened and sat down on a chair beside her, stroking her hair like a child and saying, "Hush now, you mustn't be nervous. I know who drove you to the hospital, and I'm not just going to let it go. Believe me, everything will be all right now." Beatrice wiped away her tears, squeezed the man's hand tightly, and whispered, "Thank you. You're the best. I would definitely be lost without you. The way you take care of me as if I were your wife. It feels so good. But I understand that you just feel sorry for me, that I imposed on your head with my problems. It's embarrassing even." William leaned over, kissed her cheek gently, and whispered, "My silly girl, I love you. Don't you realize that yet? I want to spend every day of my life with you, and I'll love my child as my own, but we'll decide all that later. Right now, chicken soup, no arguments. Okay, I'm going to feed you now. Let me put the pillow up higher so that you'll be comfortable." It was as if a garden had blossomed in Beatrice's soul. She ate the soup and the cherries with gusto. William sat with her for a long time, until the nurses began to swear, and they could hardly say goodbye. William left the hospital and immediately dialed the number of his debtor, Mrs. Megan. He was furious and almost shouting, "Your son has crossed the line. I'm going to destroy him. Tell him so." The woman turned pale and ran to her son's room. He was drinking whiskey straight from the bottle, not himself. Mrs. Megan screamed, "Lord, what else have you done? Why am I being punished like this?" Taylor called, said, "You're finished." "What did you do?" Thomas sobered up instantly, as if he hadn't been drinking at all. He pulled out his traveling bag and began frantically throwing things into it. "I urgently need to go far away abroad. Give me money." "Mom, don't just stand there. Or do you really want him to find me?" Mother hysterically, How to go away? We're in such trouble. Are you going to leave me alone? I'm actually in debt because of you. If I give you everything in the safe, what will I be left with?" "I'll go to the world. Just tell me what's going on." But Thomas seemed mad. He shoved his mum roughly away and took out all the cash, stuffed it in his bag, and just ran away. Fear was driving him. He thought Beatrice had already filed a report and he was going to jail, and he didn't want to go to jail. He didn't care about his mother. He'd grown up selfish, taking her money and care for granted. He figured he'd get by on his own. It wasn't the first time. Mrs. Megan sat staring at the wall and swaying. There were no tears, though there was a great emptiness in her soul. Thomas, her only and favorite son, had abandoned her at such a difficult time. So he didn't love her at all, didn't appreciate all she had done for him. How can that be? She'd worked hard for him. She'd built her career. She'd gone head over heels for him. It's all for nothing. What's going to happen now? There's no more work. The salon is closed, and she has a huge debt, and the house is mortgaged. She was scared. William was really pissed off. He completely ruined the debtor and even took her flat. And the fact that Thomas had escaped didn't upset him. So much the better. William knew his son couldn't do it without his mummy. He is the last coward and scoundrel, and fate will punish him. Beatrice had recovered. She was discharged from the hospital. Soon she went on maternity leave and came to live with William in the mansion. They began to live as a family. The man took such touching care of her. They liked to take leisurely walks in the park, feed the pigeons, or watch interesting films cuddled up together. Mrs. Cynthia was pleased that William had now found his soulmate. She could see that his eyes were burning, that he was truly happy. The couple decided to visit Beatrice's mom in the village to get to know each other. Mrs. Tiffany warmly welcomed them, heated the sauna, cooked homemade sausage, baked pies. William had not had such a hearty holiday for a long time. He kept asking how and how Mum Beatrice lived and was amazed at her stamina. After all, she worked from morning till night. The house and the household and the vegetable garden, all on her. He suggested earnestly, "Mrs. Tiffany, it must be hard for you, isn't it? Why don't you move to our town? There you'll have all the benefits of civilization, you'll have a rest, go to museums and exhibitions, and Beatrice is close by." But the woman flatly refused. "Thank you for the offer. Even I did not expect, very pleasant, but I refuse. My mum lived most of her life in the city. I grew up there. I know what city life is like. But it was fate that I met a country boy named Billy at the market in the city. What's more, I fell so in love that I followed him to the country to live. And now that I've got my whole life behind me, I'm pretty sure I don't want to go back. I love my village with all my soul. The air is different here. The birds sing and the grass smells. I feel good and peaceful here. Besides, how can I leave my cows on the farm? They're waiting for me. I call each of them by name, stroke their flanks, talk to them. So you'd better come and visit me more often. Bring your grandchildren for milk. I'd be delighted. William, I want to say thank you for my daughter from the bottom of my heart. After she broke up with that fiancé of hers, she's been a wreck. It was scary to look at her. And now I look. Quite a different thing. Her cheeks are pink again. Her eyes are burning. She chirps, laughs. And I feel good. So if you're thinking of living together, get married, don't delay. Because it's not human somehow. I see you're a good man. You won't hurt Beatrice. Don't think that the child is not your own. The father is the one who raised the child, put him on his feet and loved him. And there, you'll see, you'll have children of your own. So I bless you, lovebirds. Love and advice to you." The couple signed modestly. They did not make a fuss. They lived amicably, almost never quarreled. Beatrice gave birth to a girl named Veronica. William wrote her on himself and was very proud of it. They took turns to get up to the baby at night, together walked with a pram in the park. Life flowed calmly and measuredly, and it seemed that their family's quiet happiness could not be disturbed. Mrs. Cynthia, thanks to Beatrice's efforts and endeavors, was able to walk with a stick. Beatrice developed a special exercise program for her mother-in-law and gave her massages. William bought the equipment, and it gave excellent results. Mrs. Cynthia loved little Veronica, thought of her as her granddaughter, looked after her, and played with her. She saw how William squared his shoulders, how he loved the girl and treasured his family. Lately, Beatrice had become anxious. It seemed to her that someone was following her. She could feel it in her back, and when she looked round, there was no one. William only laughed and called her Sherlock Holmes. He didn't believe it. He thought that it was her maternal instincts so sharpened, and she is overly worried about her daughter. One day, Beatrice was walking with her daughter and sat down on a bench on a deserted playground, rocking the pram. The weather was marvelous, sunny, the baby was sound asleep. The woman relaxed in the sun, her eyes began to close. Then she felt something splashed in her face and the pram was ripped out of her hands. Beatrice could not open her eyes. Everything was a blur, tears were flowing, and a searing pain ran down her face. She tried to feel for the pram and vaguely saw that someone was rolling it. The woman screamed and passers-by ran up to her. She was screaming, "The baby has been stolen, stolen. Call the police, somebody. Help." The commotion started. William came, the police, the ambulance. Beatrice's eyes were washed and pumped, and the pain began to subside. Little by little, they started to ask her about everything. But what could she say? She just sobbed and kept saying, "I closed my eyes for a minute, and that's it, there is no child. Where should I look for her now? What if it's a maniac or a sick psycho? If he kills my girl, I'll die. I cannot live without her." William consoled his wife and then cried out, "How did I forget? We have a GPS sensor in the pram. I bought it on purpose. We can track where the baby is." The police immediately seized on this information, checked everything and determined the location and showed it to the parents. Beatrice immediately recognized the area. That's Thomas's house. So he kidnapped his daughter. But why? We need to get there right away. We don't know what he's up to. He was threatening to take revenge on me, the bastard. A squad of police immediately went to the scene. William and Beatrice went with them. They just couldn't sit and wait. It was unbearable. To everyone's surprise, the door was unlocked, and the pram was indeed standing in the yard empty. In the house could be heard the tearful crying of a baby. Everything inside Beatrice's mind turned upside down. She wanted to scream, but William covered her mouth with his palm and signaled her to keep quiet so as not to scare the criminals away. The policeman cautiously opened the door to the house. In the bedroom, a disheveled and aged Mrs. Megan sat on the bed. She was rocking the girl with exasperation and saying, "Oh, you're my granddaughter. Oh, you're my sweetie. Now you are only mine, don't cry. You'll get used to it. I'm your grandmother." Seeing the police, the woman clutched the child tightly to her and started shouting, "Mine, I won't give it back. This is my granddaughter. This is all that's left of Thomas. Go away." Beatrice was also screaming hysterically. "Mrs. Megan, what are you doing? Give me my baby back. Why did you steal Veronica? You gave her up yourself. You said you'd never recognize her. You have no right. I don't torture the baby. She's hungry and scared. Give her here, I beg you." The woman seemed maddened. She shook the child like a doll and shrieked, "Is that how you talk? I beg you. It's all because of you our whole life is in ruins. What do you know that Thomas went to jail and hanged himself in prison? I don't have a son anymore. I have no one but my granddaughter. I've been watching you for a long time, waiting for the moment. What a mom sleeping through her daughter. Get out. I won't give my baby to anyone." The policeman stealthily surrounded Mrs. Megan and twisted her round. William jumped up and snatched the girl out of her arms and handed her to Beatrice. She kissed her little girl, soothing her. Veronica felt in her mum's arms and quieted down. She only sobbed occasionally. The police officers led the distraught woman into the car. "Citizen Megan Wilson, you're under arrest for child abduction. You shouldn't have done that. Now you're in serious trouble. You're looking at some serious jail time." Mrs. Megan howled and cursed Beatrice, blaming her for all her troubles. At home, having calmed down and put the baby to bed, the couple talked in the kitchen. Beatrice said, "How frightened I was. My life just stopped the second my daughter was kidnapped. God, what a family. When are they going to leave me alone? I think the ex-mother-in-law has gone mad. There's no other way to explain this wild act. I feel sorry for her. She's ruined her life and her son's too. Oh my goodness. Thomas is dead. I had no idea. Now I think it's a good thing he left me. I would have had a lot of grief with him." William embraced his wife and replied, "I don't feel sorry for them at all. Their whole lives are made up of lies and hypocrisy, so they both got what they deserved. But you're right. It's a good thing Thomas left you, or I wouldn't have my destiny, you Beatrice. I just came in to say thank you and fell in love like a boy. Now they won't hurt us anymore. Thomas is gone, and his mum's going to jail. I'm surprised she hasn't been locked up for fraud." But Mrs. Megan wasn't locked up at all. She was declared insane and placed on compulsory treatment in a psychoneurological department. The woman then returned to reality and mourned her dead son, then again became aggressive and threatened to kill Beatrice, heard voices in her head, consulted with them. There was no trace of her former beauty and gloss. Dirty, wrinkled old woman with black hair of an incomprehensible color and eyes burning with hatred. A terrible sight. A natural ending to a misspent life of hatred and envy. Mrs. Tiffany's birthday was approaching, and Beatrice and William were going to the village. They bought some presents and an expensive hover as a present, because her mother had got into the habit of sweeping the house with a broom. The feast was a great success. The tables were placed right behind the vegetable garden in the meadow. There were friends and neighbors. They were having fun. In the middle of the feast, William stood up and announced, "Dear guests, today we are celebrating Mrs. Tiffany's anniversary. You all know how much she loves her farm. how many years of her life she has given to this hard work, and how she fiddles with the Browns. I've also heard the bad news that the farm is closing down, that it's unprofitable, that the milk is being bought up for pennies, and that's what I've decided. It's all wrong. Everything depends on the owner. You need to look for outlets. In the city, for example, natural dairy products are always in price. Now, many city dwellers have switched to proper nutrition and appreciate organic products. So, my dear mother-in-law, I have such a gift for you. Here are the documents. From this day on, you are not just a milkmaid, but a farm manager. I bought it. You and I will change everything there, buy modern machines. I found a network of shops willing to take milk at a good price. We'll make it work. I hope you enjoyed my surprise. Mrs. Tiffany couldn't believe her ears and wept. You really aren't joking. How can it be? What a joy, ladies. Our village will blossom. It will stand on its feet. Thank you, darling. I'll do my best. Beatrice, my daughter, did you hear? Hold on tight to your husband. He's the best. Mrs. Tiffany said about her new business with a great deal of knowledge. She worked tirelessly, making sure that all her favorite cows were kept in the best conditions. The workers mastered the new equipment and could not be pleased. My hands won't hurt anymore. It's so much easier. Beatrice often came to visit the village with her family. Little Veronica loved to play with the rabbits and the dog Bujan, and the dog kept trying to get close to her, asking to be petted. Mrs. Cynthia also liked the countryside, even though she was a city intellectual. She walked along the forest paths, enjoyed the clean air, and thanked God every day for sending her such a wonderful daughter-in-law. It was as if Beatrice breathed happiness into their family. Her laughter rang like a bell everywhere, and her cheerfulness and good mood were transmitted to all the family. After all, the most important thing is the atmosphere in the house, and then you want to live. Emily, are you going to catch it or not? But how many times do I have to say it? The voice of the head nurse, Jennifer Jones, sounded. Emily flinched and, stopping looking out the window, hurried to do her boss's bidding. A job is a job is a job. Jennifer Jones, and who were you staring at? Emily, you were looking for a fiancé. I bet you were looking for a fiancé, weren't you? I'm right. Jennifer spoke up again. Emily, no, what do grooms have to do with it? I don't care about them right now. There's a man standing in the yard. He's been coming in for days, staring at the windows like he's waiting for something. Jennifer went to the window and smirked gloatingly. Jennifer Jones, but you're a piece of work. Emily, are you hallucinating or something? There's no man here. What if you don't want to work? Just say so. Why are you making up stories? Emily, mopping with a mop, said the young nurse. She looked out the window. The hospital courtyard was empty. Only the elderly janitor, John Smith, was sweeping the yard in his measured and leisurely rhythm. A swish, swish, swish rustle of the broom on the asphalt, and indeed, there was no one. But there was, and I know there was. Jennifer Jones just shook her head. Jennifer Jones, Emily's weird. She lives with her grandmother. She doesn't know much about her parents, either dead or something else. But they live in a small house in the suburbs and live in poverty. You don't have to be very smart to understand the reason Grandma is sick, and most of the money is spent on medicine. Jennifer stayed in the hallway a little longer, watching the nurse clean up, and then went to the nurse's station. What about her? Rumor had it that she was a favorite of the head of the department himself, Gregory Thompson. Gregory was a respected man, and no one in the clinic could not cross him, except the chief physician, and even then for business. Everyone else preferred to keep quiet. Why spoil relations with someone on whom your welfare and future career depended? If you cross him, you're in disfavor. Then you can forget about summer vacation and time off for time worked, unlike others. Jennifer knew how to approach Gregory without being embarrassed that he was married. What was there to be embarrassed about? People are adults. She wasn't as shallow as Emily. I can't believe she'd do something like that. Last week, Emily tried to throw dirty water on Gregory. The bucket slipped out of her hands or something, but she poured it all over the superintendent. How he screamed and shouted in his loud voice, and Emily just stood back and lowered her eyes. She was the simplicity of a saint. Emily was good at her job, though, and Jennifer had to admit it. But that was the end of her sympathy for her subordinate. Jennifer didn't like Emily. Oh, she didn't like her. You'd never know what was in that quiet pool of hers. Emily was a person with her own principles. You could expect anything from such a person. Of course, Emily didn't know this and could only guess why the head nurse disliked her. As she scrubbed the floors, she thought again about the The strange creature she'd seen in the hospital courtyard. Had she imagined it? After all, Emily had seen that dog a couple days ago. It was a miracle, that's all. After changing the water for clean water once again, she went to clean the right wing of the building, where the so-called VIP rooms were located. Mostly wealthy people, who had enough money to pay for more comfortable conditions and increased attention of the medical staff, were treated here. Although, according to Emily herself, they were treated the same way as everyone else. And that means that all the privileges of the rich consisted only in these separate wards with TV, internet, and other benefits of civilization. Opening the door of the first room, Emily asked politely, "Mr. Johnson, can I mop the floors and wipe down the windowsills? I'll be quick. You won't even notice." The patient smiled. "Yes, of course. Do whatever you need to do, Emily, you're not bothering me at all." The orderly smiled back and, after thanking the patient for understanding, got to work. She knew that Robert Johnson was a businessman and, according to the superintendent, had an impressive amount of money. He could afford a lot of things. But Emily herself saw only a fixed sadness in his eyes. Mr. Johnson's illness was serious. Being around this pleasant-looking man, the nurse sincerely sympathized with him and wished him a speedy recovery. "Thank you. Buckle up," he said. "Say, what do we have outside our window today? Sunny or cloudy?" "I'm really embarrassed to ask this, but I didn't have the strength to get out of bed at all. I feel so weak, but I don't know why yet." "I can't really see the sun, but there seems to be some rays breaking through the clouds," Emily replied. "Sunshine is good." "Sunshine is life," Mr. Johnson nodded in agreement. Emily nodded and continued wiping the floor with a damp cloth. Disinfection and cleanliness were above all the key to health for both patient and healthcare provider. But Emily had no sooner cleaned half the room when the door opened, revealing a well-groomed woman in her 40s with a haughty expression. "Well, here we are cleaning again," the guest began instead of greeting. "Please tell me, may I come to my husband and be alone with him?" Emily looked at her with a hunted look and hurried out of the room. Everyone knew that Robert Johnson's wife, Violetta, was an extremely scandalous woman for whom it cost nothing to cause a scandal. "She's got a good thing going," Emily's partner, Nurse Jennifer, kept saying. "Maybe he'll die. That's a good thing. Maybe the rich guy will be gone, and she'll inherit the money." Emily never liked that kind of talk. Why should she count other people's money, go through their dirty laundry? "Don't you have anything else to do?" But her meeting with Violet Johnson had left her with the most contradictory feelings. The rich woman was too insolent and defiant. No, Emily yielded, of course, did not show her temper. What was she compared to Emily Williams? Yeah, there's a gulf between them that no bridge can bridge. I'll wait. Once she's gone, then I'll go into the room and go home, Emily thought. The voices of Robert Johnson and his wife could be heard through the tightly closed doors. Emily did not eavesdrop, of course, but waited patiently for the visitor to leave, unwillingly witnessing such an unpleasant conversation. Emily Williams felt extremely uncomfortable. It was mostly Emily who was trying hard to get her way. "Honey, why don't you want Michael to go?" "After all, he's your son too," my son Emily Williams said. "Emily, do you really think so? When did he become my son?" "Yes, I raised Mike since he was 15 years old, but my teaching didn't do him any good," Robert Johnson replied. "Last week he wrecked his new car again. A couple days before that, he got into a fight with a croupier at the casino. Is that what you think Johnson's son should be like, even if he's adopted?" Emily Williams bit her lip. Her husband, although he was ill, but still in verbal battles could shut up anyone. "Robert, but don't be so hard on Michael. You'll see, he'll change after this event," Emily insisted. "I'll be sure to talk to him." "How can your son only change in a bad way? I'm too scared to take phone calls. Every time I sit and wonder where they are calling from the police, hospital, or from the store, where he broke the window again." Robert Johnson objected tiredly, making it clear that he is very tired and wants to rest. But Emily Williams was not going to give up so easily. Instead, she again began to defend her son, whose problems have long had to solve her husband. Tired of waiting for Emily to leave the room, Emily went outside to chat with the janitor. "Good morning, John Say. Have you seen a dog around here?" "You know, a big one," light-colored Emily asked. "Hello, Emily. Why? Did you like him?" John Smith asked and looked at the nurse appraisingly, as if deciding whether to tell her the truth or not. "No, John the First called him Mickey." "Well, maybe he's not Mickey at all, of course. Homeless guy, you know. Alone, like a finger. I understand him." "A dog's a joy," the janitor added. "Where's Mickey's owner now?" Emily asked cautiously. "He's in intensive care, hit by a car in the street," John said. It was a quiet, inconspicuous street. "I was coming back from the store in the evening when some speeding driver drove by. They say he felt everything. He smashed the window and rushed to the owner. The paramedic from the ambulance said he lay down next to the owner and began to lick him with his tongue. Since then, the dog has been coming to the hospital, looking at the windows, hardy. I let him in my room out of the kindness of my heart. He's a house dog. He's not used to spending the night." Emily nodded sympathetically and looked at the janitor with respect. John Smith was a good man, simple but very kind-hearted. After talking some more, Emily walked to his back room and almost immediately saw a black nose sticking out of a gap in the doorway. "Mickey, you're so handsome," she exclaimed. The dog had sad eyes, like human eyes. Hearing the girl's voice, the dog came out of the janitor's den and gently touched her hand with his nose. "Good girl, faithful dog. Don't worry, your master will be fine. Our doctors are amazing. They'll have your master back on his feet before you know it." She patted the dog on the withers. Emily saw Emily Williams walk confidently out of the clinic building. A little farther away in the parking lot was her car. A car Emily would have had to save up for years, if not decades, to buy. "Well, now we can go back and clean the ward properly," she thought, and waved her hand to the janitor. "I don't miss me, John Smith. I still want to come back later. My grandmother wrapped me up such delicious pies for lunch." The dog walked Emily almost all the way to the front door and then back to the back room. Gregory Thompson greeted the orderly with a pleased smile. "Here, Emily is back. Sorry about that." "Don't worry, Gregory Thompson. It's okay, I understand." "Family is sacred," the businessman sighed sadly and thought for a moment. Feeling his attentive gaze, Emily was embarrassed and went back to cleaning. Gregory Thompson remained silent for a while, his brain doing some heavy analytical work. A couple of times he wanted to call Emily, but then he began to doubt the correctness of his conclusions. Finally, the businessman made up his mind, like a drowning man grasping at the last moment for a life-saving straw. "Emily, tell me, when is your vacation?" Gregory Thompson began from afar. "I don't know, probably December. Another 4 months to wait at least," she replied, intercepting her patient's gaze. Asked cautiously why Gregory Thompson coughed, but when he came to his senses, still answered the question. "I need your help, Emily. It just so happens that there's no one else to talk to but you. It sounds wild, but I want you to play the part of my daughter. For a little while, of course, and not for free." Emily's breath caught in her astonishment, and the bucket fell out of her hands, hitting the ward with a nasty metallic squeal. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No, it's not a joke. I'm sorry I started so soon. No time to prepare. You see, my new business partners are all family people. They like to go on outings together, leisure activities. They try to get to know all the background of the future partner, get to know the family members, spend time together before making a deal. What's that got to do with me?" "Gregory Thompson, where am I and where is the business?" Emily couldn't help herself. It was obvious from the businessman's face that he didn't like to rush and intended to lay it all out in front of his interlocutor, but only not at once, but gradually. "Emily, don't judge me harshly. Here's the thing. Investors intend to organize a corporate party for children and all employees after the deal. They'll rent a cottage on the riverbank, organize a disco, a party in general. According to their idea, it should unite everyone involved in the business project. It's the right move, of course. No one will have any thoughts of betrayal. Yes, it's an interesting idea," Emily remarked with slight irony. Gregory Thompson smiled. At last he had succeeded in arousing her genuine interest. "All nice, but I have no one to send to the event. My stepson has completely lost his way. All he has on his mind are bars and girls. Even if I let him go to the party, he's bound to get drunk and fight with someone. So I thought I'd make up the story that I have a daughter. I mean, from my first marriage. You're gonna have a great time. They don't know you in the business world, and they're not likely to see the trick." "But why me?" Emily asked, hardly able to contain her excitement. "No, don't think anything of it, Mr. Johnson. But there are more worthy candidates. Hire someone from a staffing agency, for example." The businessman wiped the sweat from his forehead and leaned back on the pillow. Of course, he hadn't expected the conversation to be easy, but Emily had proven to be a tough nut to crack. Robert took a breath and continued the conversation with renewed vigor. "I don't like these agencies and model girls, Emily. They're all like dolls, as if they were artificial. And I need a man with a twist, not corrupted by money and all that. That's why I'm asking for your help. I'm about to have an operation. I don't know if I'm going to make it or not. Think about it. Don't be in a hurry to say no. With your bosses, I'll arrange to give you a vacation and not to oppose." After the words of the businessman, Emily smiled. It happened against her will. Mr. Johnson's proposal was very interesting. For a moment, she even imagined herself as the millionaire's daughter. The fantasy was attractive, and the girl did not hesitate to believe it. But Emily did not go further than her dreams and shook her head. "No, Mr. Johnson, it is not for me. Among these rich people, I will be like a white crow. They'll notice the stark difference in my clothes, my hair, even my shoes. How can I go to this party?" But Robert Johnson was not in vain considered an experienced negotiator and immediately caught a shadow of doubt in the voice of the nurse. "You see, you have to decide here and now," he continued to persuade. "Don't worry, Emily. I'll provide you with money. We'll buy dresses not worse than the others. We'll do your hair, manicure, pedicure, whatever you want. But you have to help me. I don't know how it's going to go. Maybe the surgery won't help me. And I can't count on Michael not getting drunk. I can't rely on Emily Williams. She only thinks about her son. She thinks he's always being hurt. And I want what's best for him. At this rate, he's going to grow up to be an alcoholic. And then what? He'll blow my business away. And then he'll sell my real estate. I don't want that. You know, I'm sorry. You can call it a freak show. can't you? But as soon as I saw you, I knew you were the best candidate." Emily's cheeks flushed, and a sweet smile played on her lips. What can be said, but compliments are always pleasant, especially from such a representative man as Mr. Johnson. "In principle, I don't mind. Only with work problems, I'm unlikely to be released. My partner, Lisa, is always sick and often takes a vacation at her own expense, but the staff is not supposed to have more people. So I have to take care of 2 people. If the head nurse will allow, the head of the department will certainly wrap up my petition." "Emily," the nurse said sadly, "leave it up to me. They'll deal with the head nurse and the head of the ward. It's a lot to take in. I've done good for this clinic. It's the 3rd year they've allocated funds for repairs and new equipment. You see, the hospital is in trouble. Now I'm afraid I'll never get out of here." Emily immediately waved her hands in protest. "Oh, come on. You've got your whole life ahead of you, Robert Johnson." But the businessman only grinned bitterly. "Come on, you can say that too. That's not the point. Emily, I wish there weren't any VIP rooms here. I wish there were rooms like mine in every ward, in every hospital building. Oh, I wish I was cured. I could do it in a heartbeat." Emily had barely opened her mouth to reply when Emily Williams, the head nurse, entered the room. "But you're missing somewhere. How long do we have to do this? It was going to clean the corridor. Do you know? Personally, I don't want that kind of work for nothing. You do realize that if Gregory Thompson sees a speck of dust anywhere, he'll be sure to give them all a kick in the ass." Meeting his eyes with the head nurse, Robert Johnson smiled meaningfully and said quietly, "Don't shout like that, Emily Williams. In fact, I have a favor to ask of you. Please give it to Gregory Thompson personally." At the mention of the superintendent, the head nurse visibly tensed, but the businessman was quick to reassure. "I need Emily to be given a full vacation, although a week is fine with us. But it must be done as soon as possible, because I can't wait any longer." He raised an eyebrow in surprise. "What vacation? Who's going to work? That's not my problem. But if Gregory Thompson says no, I'll talk to the head doctor, and I'll take her word for it at that level," Robert replied. Emily Williams looked at the young nurse with hatred, signaling that the conversation was over, but she refrained from further comment, realizing that she now had a powerful advocate. Wishing Robert a good day, the head nurse left the room, slamming the door. Lastly, I was filled with anger and resentment toward this young upstart whom I had disliked from the first day I met her. What did he see in her? If Robert weren't so sick, I'd think he was trying to make a lover of her. Only now the rich man is as good as dead. Well, I'll have to call LA and tell them what's going on. Let them keep an eye on their husband to make sure he doesn't make a mess of things, Jennifer Jones thought on her way to the head of the department. Gregory Thompson, after listening to the nurse, granted the businessman's request almost immediately. The far-sighted doctor was well aware that Robert Johnson had done a lot of good and could now count on a reciprocal favor from the management. Gregory Thompson was not stupid at all and immediately calculated the situation a couple of moves ahead. Because of the fact that if the entrepreneur now outraged, Robert will appeal directly to the chief physician, who will still fulfill his request. But Gregory, for his stubbornness, will get a good reprimand and maybe even lose the VIP palaces, the proceeds of which went into his pocket. "All right, Jennifer will tell Robert Johnson that I'll sign off on this and make sure it's done to the best of my ability," he said dryly, and pointed the nurse with a glance toward the door. It all looked as if things had been over between them for a long time. There was no such thing as an affair on the side. Tears welled up in the corners of the head nurse's eyes. This wasn't the kind of treatment Jennifer wanted. All the more so because she had a very close and stormy relationship with Gregory Thompson. Stepping out into the hallway, she immediately pulled her cell phone out of her robe pocket and dialed Robert's wife's number. "Hello? But listen, what happened to mine? I guess he wants to be alone again," Emily asked even. "Where's he going to go?" "There's another thing going on. I don't know what's gotten into Robert's head at all. Only he intends to send our new girl Emily to some event as an orderly. What kind of nurse? She's just from out of town. Isn't she by any chance the one who had to mop the ward floors today with a bucket and a rag, with a contemptuous curl of her lips?" Emily asked. "Well, yes, that's the one. I don't know what she's saying to him, only he's going to nominate her for the ladies. So you're going to have to figure it out, all right. All right, take it easy. I can't talk to you anymore." "Do you realize that? I've got work to do," Jennifer replied, and hung up. Emily thought for a moment. To tell the truth, she had expected her husband to assign and send her stepson Michael to meet the children of her future partners. The cunning woman realized that at this event her son would be able to make useful acquaintances and establish himself as the future face of the company. Emily realized that Robert didn't have long to live, and he might not survive the upcoming surgery, which meant she should have forged iron while it was still hot. Emily's thoughts flowed in only one direction, one that favored her and no one else. Emily returned home. Robert would be gone today or tomorrow, and then who would take over the firm? A woman at the head of the company. That's not a bad thing. But business is a serious business, and they don't like women very much. And it's no big deal that Michael did time when he was young. Who doesn't? We're all sinners. Robert seems to have had his share of trouble in his younger days, and now he's pretending to be a righteous man. In a state of anxious reflection, Emily was brought out by the voice of her son, who approached her from behind. "Mom, give me some money. The card just ran out, and Unlimited Robert took it. We're going out with the boys tonight." Emily turned around and looked at him reproachfully. "Michael, I'll give you the money, of course, but you could do with a little less divorce, because Robert's got an interesting combination in mind. Remember that party I told you about? There's going to be all sorts of events down by the river." "But I do. So what?" Michael grumbled unhappily. Emily Williams looked at her son with a triumphant look. "So that instead of you, Robert thought of sending some nurse instead of you. Can you believe it?" But she looked like a redneck. Very simple, her lips bowed and her hair in a braid. She's like a milkmaid from the backwoods. God, I can't believe he'd go for her. There was a shadow on Michael's face. "He won't calm down, Robert. He's at it again. Well, he won't be gone long. Anyway, I think it's time to think about a will. Why don't you get a notary to take him to see what's going on? You know, it happens. Businessmen like our father, as soon as anything, immediately give their property to orphanages or hospitals." "Come on." "I don't think so," said Emily Williams. "Robert's not stupid." Michael grinned wryly. "What do you think? You know how much money spent on homeless shelters and dog shelters? Those, what's their name? Animal shelters." Emily Williams frowned. Her son's words had clearly struck a nerve. Digging in her purse, she pulled out an old notebook in which she found the number of a lawyer she knew. She briefly outlined the situation to the notary over the phone. She asked him for a favor, to draw up a will with a visit to the address. "Is Robert Johnson really that bad? He was supposed to have an operation, so why all the fuss and fuss?" asked the elderly lawyer. "Your words to God's ears. There's no telling how this operation will end," said Emily. "What to say if Robert himself does not believe in it, and the doctors are also afraid that if you do not do the operation, he will not be long. So it's a do or die situation." "Okay, Emily, I hear you. We'll be there on time, but I'll call you beforehand," the notary said dryly. In his heart, he was shocked by the news about Robert. He had known him for a long time, and had thought of him as a strong, determined man. And now it appeared that he had nothing left to live for. How unfair life can be, especially to those who least deserve it, the notary thought, and began to pack up after the conversation. Not even 10 minutes later, Emily was summoned to the head of the department. "Oh, I'm going to get another scolding because of Robert's request. Oh, and will arrange it to me now," thought the girl with longing. But to Emily's amazement, Gregory Thompson not only approved her request for a vacation, but also gave a month's rest instead of the promised week. "Thank you very much. I'll work it off," the young nurse whispered. But Gregory Thompson just waved her off, signaling that his mission was over. Lying on the hard hospital bed, Robert Johnson stared at the ceiling and thought about how best to introduce Emily to his companions. Like any prudent man, Robert Johnson realized that no one would check his words, because in their environment it is considered a sign of bad taste. But still, it was necessary to take into account all the details, especially Emily's character, and the fact that she had never been to this kind of event. Mentally thinking over each point, Robert made notes in his notebook so he wouldn't forget this or that detail. He had never done this sort of thing before, but after his illness he had grown different, and had lost much of his strength by the time he was in his 50s. Robert was sure it was extremely difficult to surprise him with anything in his life, but when Emily Williams reappeared in the room, the amazement of the businessman exceeded all permissible limits. True, now the wife came not alone, but together with Michael and lawyer John Smith. "Well, darling, I've brought the notary. Don't be sorry, but this is a serious matter. You know I have to. Surgery, treatment, you know how big the risks are. Would you make a will? You never know, just so there's no problems later. Otherwise, if something happens, you'll be completely out of it. No, of course you live longer, but this will. I will then in the fireplace to burn myself personally, not the least bit embarrassed by what was said," announced Emily Williams. Robert Johnson looked at the notary and saw the embarrassment in his eyes. However, there was a certain sense in his wife's words, and it would be foolish to pretend that this was not the case. The thoughts in Robert's head were spinning at breakneck speed, processing an inconceivable number of operations per second. An inner voice kept telling him, calling to his mind and forcing him to look at the situation from different angles. "That's who I should write my will to, but not Michael. He's fluffing his feathers, looking at me like he's already buried me. He's just waiting to take my chair as soon as possible," thought the businessman, and turned his gaze to Emily Williams. Spouse also did not cause a lot of confidence. All the same woman, she was a squabbling and more than anything in the world loved restaurants and beautiful life. This is he, Robert Johnson, a former engineer of the plant for the manufacture of reinforced concrete structures. Wore ordinary clothes and did not strive for ostentatious luxury and expensiveness. The businessman had a cheap watch, and he loved sales which, according to one famous person, showed the same time as a watch bought for $1 million. Still, whatever the case, the will had to be made out to Emily Williams. To give everything to Michael at Robert simply did not rise to the hand. At the same time, the businessman was aware that after his death, his wife will still transfer some of the assets to his son by right of blood relationship with Robert Johnson. I think you've thought this through properly. So put your signature here, and I, in turn, will probate your will and be obliged to remain silent," John Smith summarized, sweat beading on his forehead. To be honest with himself, he could not remember a time when Robert Johnson had looked so bad. In the months of his illness, the businessman had shrunk to nearly half his size and lost weight. His cheeks had slumped, and his once strong, powerful body was completely devoid of relief muscles, and only Robert's eyes radiated warmth. They looked at the world with genuine interest, inherent in his inquisitive mind. Having signed the will, the businessman realized that he had crossed the Rubicon and burned all bridges behind him. Now, if he does not recover from the operation, his entire business will eventually pass into the hands of his daughter, Emily Williams, although he could easily transfer some of the property to distant relatives whom, however, never seen. But only just the sense in this he did not see with all his desire, and Robert was also unbearably painful to look at the joyful smile of the stale face of his wife, who literally blossomed before his eyes. At some point, Emily Williams even seemed to him a kind of energy vampire, feeding on his energy, and he expected from day to day to go to the next world. But Emily, of course, did not know all this and mentally tuned herself for the coming vacation. Well, a week or two, and the event that Robert Johnson told her about. I'll spend the rest of the time with my grandmother. She hardly ever sees me. She misses me a lot from work, and I'll be able to take the dog. He's a very good dog, and he's a good dog to have in the house. The rest of the shift flew by, and before Emily left, as promised, she stopped by Robert Johnson's room. Despite a strong dose of medication, the businessman was still awake and eagerly awaited her arrival. "So, did it all work out, Emily?" "Robert Johnson, it worked out just fine. I've been given a month's vacation." "Well, I told you, I've got this legend in my notebook. What you'll have to say at the event. I've left a little man on the payroll. She will help you get used to it, and will help you with the purchase of clothes," said the businessman. "Robert Johnson, thank you so much. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have dreamed of this." He smiled. He liked talking to Emily more and more. If he could lose 20 to 25 years, he would definitely go after this beautiful woman, whose soul glowed with the kindness and inner energy that filled her. The thought of it made Robert feel inexpressibly cozy and warm, making him immediately want to sink into the embrace of morphine. As soon as Emily left the clinic building, she was immediately called by John Smith. "Here's the thing. I don't know how to say this. Anyway, Master Mickey passed away today. He, poor thing, as if he sensed it, began to howl so drearily. I locked him in the back room. Of course. Otherwise, I might have gotten the chief of medicine at last, but it's not a good idea to keep him here. He's going to wither away. Why don't you come to LA with me? You know, for a while. You live in a private house. It'd be easier on you. Otherwise, he's smart, he's not naughty, he asks to go outside when he needs to." Emily looked sadly at the dog, who sat at John Smith's feet with his head down. "What if he doesn't go? I can't drag him by force. I'm sorry, John, but I don't think Mickey will go." "You don't even think about it. Did he like her? I knew right away I had to be gentle with him and pet his ear a lot. That's what animals expect. They, like people, need support and understanding," the janitor said confidently. Emily smiled and gently waved her finger at Mickey. "Come on, come to me." The dog reluctantly got up and then came over to the girl and started sniffing her hands. Emily gasped in amazement. "Oh, I forgot about that. Who promised you grandma's pies? Take one with cabbage and one with potatoes. But if you don't like it with cabbage, I'll eat it myself on the way. You go with the potatoes. Take the beer and treats with you. Sure, don't forget. She's still a little homesick, but she seems to listen to you. So take Emily and don't hesitate." She thought for a moment, then stroked Mickey's scruff and led him toward the exit from the hospital yard. The dog followed obediently, as if he'd known Emily for months or even years. When Tamara Ivanovna saw her granddaughter with a huge dog on the threshold, she recoiled in fright. "Oh, granddaughter, who have you brought?" "Don't be afraid, Grandma. It's Mickey, a pet dog. His master was hit by a car the other day. So he's here now." Anyway, the owner was gone, and the dog was pining and started howling under the clinic's windows. I had to take him back. Look at him. I thought that only happened in the movies. Well, if that's the case, let him live. What are we, not human beings? We'll survive somehow, won't we? We're not the last piece of food, said Tamara Ivanovna, just like John Smith said. Mickey behaved calmly at home and almost immediately found a comfortable place near the door next to the food bowl. The dog refused to eat that day, and the rest of the evening he whined softly, like a wolf scratching at the door with his paw. But toward nightfall, Mickey calmed down and fell into an uneasy canine sleep. The next morning, Emily awoke earlier than usual and began to study her fictional biography, which Robert Johnson had sketched out fluently for her. In fact, the legend was quite simple and boiled down to the fact that from an early age, Emily lived with her mother and grandmother in the province, and after graduating from high school decided to find her father and tell him about her existence. The story, invented by Robert Johnson, looked quite logical and had almost no rough edges in the modern world. What doesn't happen? And even the appearance of heirs from the first marriage no longer surprises anyone. After thinking for a while, Emily called the phone number given to the businessman, and in a minute she was on a video call with a woman who called herself Jennifer Jones as. It turned out a little later. She worked as a secretary at Robert Johnson's company and had known him for years. The employee was faithful, loyal, and knew more about fashion and etiquette than anyone else. At the same time, Emily Williams was instructing Michael on how to handle the situation. Son, you would follow Jennifer's secretary to your father's. Chances are Robert will enlist her services and ask for her help. Don't you dawdle. They're probably going to the beauty parlor. This is the address. You get in there and tell the girls to take this stuffed animal. A vegetable garden, all right? Say hello from me. They've been feeding off me for a long time, so I guess they won't do anything bad by hurting this village. They'll just avoid it by a mile. His mother's voice about saying hello to Michael pleased him a lot, especially after hearing about his stepfather's action. But that's okay. Hang in there, Robert. You'll be sorry. Oh, you'll be sorry. Out of sight, Michael had always treated his stepfather with contempt and hatred, calling his stepfather a poor engineer. He saw him as the root of all his troubles, as if it was Robert who got behind the wheel drunk or hit an innocent croupier. About Michael's father, Emily told little, but among the business elite rumors that he got involved with crime and stepped on a slippery slope. But neither Robert nor his stepson knew the main thing. All this time, Emily faithfully met with her ex-husband, considering him the standard of a man and alpha male. After all, to lead a normal married life with George was simply impossible. Where was it? Emily's whole life would instantly shrink to the size of the eye of a needle, when she would have to worry about only one thing: how to collect her husband a huge transfer to prison and pay his next card debt. Robert was another matter, smart, intelligent, wealthy. True, Emily had no feelings for him at all, but that's all right. You can't eat love alone, as they say. Emily had a backup on that score, George. Time-tested and ruthless, like an exiled lone wolf. Emily had seen him in her late husband's place beside Michael. Experience, strength, wisdom, and youthful exuberance, the perfect union. George would quickly nail all competitors to the nail. Emily and George had been seeing each other more and more lately, as if anticipating the imminent denouement caused by Robert's possible death. How is he still alive? He's in great health, George asked every time they met. Emily only shook her head. Of course he is. Do you think I'd keep such a thing from you? Ridiculous. As soon as Robert goes, the whole town was buzzing like an alarmed beehive. Be patient. It won't be long now. This operation will be his last. George gritted his teeth. But if he had his way, he would have sent that rich man to the grave long ago. He'd tried to tinker with the rich guy's tires or fix the brakes, but it was no use, but to no avail. Once I even tried to burn down his country house, but it didn't work. The fire department happened to be nearby. The fire only touched the wall of the house and was quickly extinguished by a lot of water from the hoses. No matter how hard George tried, it was no use. The businessman behaved as if nothing had happened, as if not noticing the attempts on his life. And then, desperate, George turned to a fortune teller. There were strange rumors that she could do anything. So George decided to take this desperate step, even though he was a recidivist with a strong spirit. But when he got to the fortune teller's house, he got cold feet. Jessica looked to be in her early 50s. She had all the trappings of a fortune teller: brooches, balls, medium, and other tinsel. After listening to the visitor, Jessica asked the bandit to give her a photograph of the person she wanted to cast a spell on. George, anticipating such a question, readily handed her a picture of Robert. The fortune teller's face grew serious. The fingers of her hand clenched so that they involuntarily crumpled the photograph, tearing its edges. "Are you having a seizure or something?" George asked anxiously then. But Jessica only shook her head and said she needed time. There will be a result for sure. Otherwise, I won't give you money up front. Don't get your hopes up, George growled. The fortune teller nodded in agreement, and George ran out of her house, drenching himself in cold sweat. Then, of course, he cheated. He'd cheated, and he'd never paid any money for her services. She'll get by. She's used to living off other people's money, George thought, happy that, after the right Robert Johnson, literally withers before his eyes. And while the hapless lover of Emily Williams, George, waited for the departure of the businessman in the next world, Emily clearly followed his instructions and prepared for an important event. Jennifer's help in this matter was simply invaluable. Watching Emily try on one dress after another, Jennifer couldn't hold back a cute smile. It seemed that the young attendant was ready to rake the whole store. To her slender figure, any marginally acceptable outfit looked simply gorgeous. "All we need is a coachman and a pumpkin carriage," Emily said admiringly, looking at her reflection in the mirror. "That's all right. There's more to come." "You'll have a carriage and a coachman," Jennifer replied. Everything was going well until Emily went to the beauty parlor to get her hair done. That's where the trouble started. First, she got a manicure, painting her nails a disgusting swampy color. The girl wanted to be indignant, but the master immediately assured her that such a color scheme is now in fashion. Swallowing her resentment, Emily sat down in the hairdresser's chair, and then she was met with the biggest disappointment of her life. All she wanted was a little styling, to turn the ends of her hair into the curls she'd loved since she was a little girl. But instead, Emily was persuaded to dye her hair. That's where the main trap awaited her. By cleverly switching the dye, the master dyed her hair in such a color that Emily covered her eyes with her hands in horror. God, what have you done? Why did my hair look like an alien's? Is this how I'm going to go to the meeting now? Barely holding back tears, Emily exclaimed. Unfortunately, Jennifer was not around at that moment because she urgently went to the clinic where Robert Johnson was already being prepared for surgery. And if you want, we can wreckle her. I'm sorry such a simple dye job got mixed up. Human error, you know, the manageress, who had received detailed instructions a couple hours ago, said icily. I don't have time for anything, don't you see? I've got to leave for a meeting in half an hour. In one breath, Emily blurted out and left the hated salon. In the fresh air, the color of her hair seemed even more shocking, making passersby stop and point their fingers at her in amazement. And knowing the address where the meeting was to take place, Emily called a cab and waited for the car. In the meantime, Michael, choking with laughter, was telling his mother the latest news. Well done, son. You knew you wouldn't fool me. Now let that hillbilly try to get away with it, and the girls from the salon a special thanks to pass on that I will not forget this service. Also, I don't think you're going to stop halfway through. It's not puppies to drown. Pampering the body with made-up porridge, Emily Williams said with a smile. 5 minutes ago, she received a call from Gregory Thompson, informing her that Robert Johnson was being prepared for surgery, which meant that the inheritance would not be long in coming. Having heard such curious news from his ex-wife, George rubbed his hands together. Hopefully, tomorrow he will be able to see Emily Williams without hiding. Emily had to drive for about 40 minutes before the driver did not bring to a huge cottage, located a couple hundred meters from the riverbank. The estate was surrounded on 3 sides by dense forest, and the gate and front door were just facing the river itself. Wow, what a beauty! Emily marveled involuntarily, forgetting for a moment the discomfort of her hair. A real rich man's paradise. Of course. They say it has 2 swimming pools, a tennis court, a bar, and a dance floor. An elderly cab driver who had stopped at the very gate obligingly chimed in. Here we are. If you need me to pick you up from here, call me. I'll rush over any time. Emily nodded and held out the money. The massive gate was unlocked, and soon the girl was on the grounds of the manor, which looked like a miniature city for entertainment. In the courtyard were already standing several young men who had arrived a little earlier than Emily. Seeing her unusual hairstyle, they immediately expressed their admiration. Wow, a real fashion challenge. No more clichés and standards. Emily's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and she tensed, expecting to be taunted. But the rich kids were friendly and didn't even think of mocking the new girl. On the contrary, they expressed their admiration for her taste and her peculiar challenge to society. Emily relaxed, smiled, and soon found herself in a very cozy environment where her wealthier peers were enjoying life and partying to the fullest. Outwardly, there was no difference between them. Just a group of young people who, by the will of their parents, found themselves in such a paradisiacal place. Emily danced, made new acquaintances, and rested her soul as she had never rested before. Young people were swimming in the river, riding on catamarans and jet skis, and building sand castles a couple of meters from the water's edge. She felt happy, not even realizing that, at that very moment, a tipsy Michael was heading toward the country mansion. The impudent major was literally bursting with self-esteem and the desire to tell everyone the truth. Michael literally burst into the party like an angry beast. Climbing onto the stage, he grabbed the microphone and thundered at the top of his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, please have your attention for a moment. You are about to hear some very exciting news. There is a shapeshifter and a liar among us. A man who is pretending to be someone else. Or rather, another. Emily turned pale and froze in shock. Michael kept talking and talking, feeling himself the master of the situation. His words caused a great resonance among young people, from which she again became the object of everyone's attention. This time, however, no one admired her. On the contrary, kind, smiling people looked at Emily with judgment. All their appearance showed that they did not want to communicate with a deceiver. Tears streamed down her cheeks, burning her skin with salty rivulets. The bitterness of shame tore at her soul. She thrashed about like a caged animal. Suddenly, she wanted freedom. To be alone with herself and cry until her eyes were red with tears. God, what a shame. Why had she agreed to this? Her feet carried her toward the river. The hooting and hollering followed. She stubbornly walked forward toward the water that would cool her heated soul. Now just a little more, and the water will wash away all the dirt of lies and deceit. As an incantation, whispered Emily, whose consciousness, in fact, beat and covered with a shroud of sticky fog. Suddenly, somewhere behind her back, she heard the exasperated scream of Jennifer Jones, who had jumped out of the car and was running toward her, kicking off her shoes. Emily, stop. Don't. Wait, honey, you have to know that. Don't go. Robert Johnson left you a will and rewrote the whole business. Emily flinched and slowly turned around. The water had reached almost to her chest when Jennifer tugged on her arm with force. Honey, come on, come on. You don't know anything. Robert Johnson outplayed everyone. What's that got to do with the inheritance? Is he dead? And what do I need his business for? Perplexed, Emily shook her head. With the fact that Emily Williams along with her lover wanted to kill him. Even if the operation had been successful, his days would have been numbered. And all because of that ill-fated fortune, Jennifer blurted out in one breath. The secretary's words didn't make anything clearer to Emily. Her ears were still ringing with the taunts of the rich men who'd chased her away from their private. Her heart was beating like crazy, and it wasn't until a little later, when it was announced that Robert Johnson had safely undergone surgery, that Jennifer explained to Emily what was going on. It all started with a fortune teller, the same Jessica, who ironically turned out to be Robert's classmate and remembered him as a kind and honorable man. Naturally, she did not cast any spoil because she did not do it in principle. She always remained kind. And evil she simply passed by, pretending that the ritual is observed. But in the case of Robert, fortune teller could not remain an indifferent witness and honestly told him about his enemies. At that moment in the mind of the businessman put together all the pieces of the puzzle. And the accident on the road, when he miraculously survived, and burned country house, where he was saved by firefighters. Unfortunately, at that point, Robert could not identify his enemy and continued to believe his wife and stepson. But when Jessica identified the repeat offender George in one of the photos, everything fell into place. In this old family photo, Emily Williams was standing in an embrace with her first husband George shortly before he received his first prison sentence. That's when Robert realized that a smart and calculating three-headed criminal from Los Angeles was working against him. Their son Michael, realizing that he will not be left alone, the businessman decided to send to the party. He liked it Nurse Emily having made a will for her. It was for this reason that Anthony left the beauty parlor so hastily to secretly bring notary Simon Lewis to make amendments to the will. All this was done half an hour before the operation, which Robert Johnson did not even hope to survive. The businessman's calculation turned out to be as simple as anything ingenious. He bequeathed the firm's assets to a complete stranger. Robert deliberately took himself out of harm's way, because in this case, his death would have no meaning for Emily Williams and George. Of course, he was taking a risk, and a big one at that. He had seen a lot of good people in his life, and he had immediately identified the traits inherent in their values. Before making this combination, Robert had made inquiries about the young nurse and realized that she was exactly the person he needed. As it happens, Robert has been unable to have children his entire life. It's a heavy burden on his shoulders. Believing that, he happily married her, dreaming of being a father to her teenage son Michael. But time passed, and the stepson became increasingly promiscuous and violent, taking the best from his biological, recidivist father George. Many then condemned Robert for the fact that he never decided to take a child from an orphanage and bring him up the way he should. The businessman was simply cowardly, afraid of responsibility, doubting his own strength and capabilities. And only when he was on the threshold of death, Robert realized that it is no longer possible to live like this. In his mind, he buried himself long ago. But still, before his possible passing into the next world, he wanted to do something good. For this very reason, he bequeathed everything to Emily, being sure that this money will bring her real happiness. But fate had it differently. Robert not only underwent surgery, but also slowly went on the mend. Seeing in the ward classmate Jessica, he was very surprised. "Here I came to check on you. You don't know I've been praying for your health all this time. I am a professed do-gooder and have never done what is attributed to me intercepting the businessman's gaze," the guest said. "Thank you, Jessica." "That was very helpful to me," Robert replied. The chamber door opened and a smiling Emily appeared on the threshold. True, this time the young orderly was no longer carrying the bucket and mop so familiar to her. "Well, hello. Daddy, that's what I should call you now," Robert Emily joked and sat down on the edge of the bed. During the time the businessman was in rehab, a lot had happened. First, Robert filed for divorce, entrusting this process to his lawyer. He also refused to help his son Michael when he got into another drunk accident. But when police officers studied the sect footage, it turned out that it was Michael who hit a pensioner on an inconspicuous street a few weeks ago. Ironically, this kindly grandfather turned out to be the owner of Mickey, who was sheltered out of pity by Emily. "I don't believe in coincidence after that. I could have refused Robert's offer not to take Mickey," and she remarked to Jessica. "Yeah, I had a crush on Robert myself in my high school years. I couldn't see the bills running after him. He was overweight by nature, but blood and milk, you know. That's what they call a good guy. I thought he didn't like me after graduation, got depressed, suffered a lot, even thought about suicide. But then I discovered my abilities. You see, after how many years still saved Robert, and now I will never let go." Tears glistened in the corners of Emily. Such a touching story she had never heard, and is unlikely to hear. After all this happened, Robert Johnson began to call Emily a daughter, joking about the fact that from now on she is a rich heiress. "Oh, come on, I can't take it. I'm applying to the economics department by correspondence. Maybe I'll learn something. And if I don't, you can help me." Robert Johnson put one arm around Jessica's shoulders and the other pulled Emily close to him. "You know, just invite me to the wedding as soon as possible. Why did I let you go to that party for nothing? You probably got your eye on someone else, too, huh? Honestly, I can see it in your eyes that you're attracted to someone, can't you?" Emily smiled. "That's right. You were right on the money. There's this guy I like. His name's Kevin. You know, he's the only one who didn't laugh at me when Michael threw mud at me on stage. And he says he fell in love with my hair. Can you believe it? The one that's pink as a boat. What am I supposed to do now? I don't know what to do. Robert Johnson probably hadn't laughed so loudly since his childhood in the slums of Los Angeles. He was echoed by Jessica and Barbara, whose infectious laughter showed all her granddaughters of deities, stage and music. Emily herself was laughing, too, with Mickey's nose in her hand as he became a full-fledged member of their newly happy family. Olivia was beginning to lose patience. She'd been preparing for this evening since yesterday, shopping, cleaning the apartment, preparing all sorts of appetizers and entrees for the family and friends. And now she was sitting there listening to her husband mock her. Adrian has an amazing ability to find a flaw in everything. Moreover, this gift is revealed in the presence of strangers, and when she and her husband are alone, more sensitive, loving and affectionate husband cannot find. But when the third, fourth, 10th person showed up, he was a fountain of sarcastic remarks about Olivia. This time she was the protagonist of the bad joke. I passed by a hairdresser's yesterday, Adrian said. Looking out the window, my wife was sitting in a chair, and the master was working on her. I think I'll wait. She comes out, and what do you think? A bald haircut. His sister Emma chuckled, running her spoon into the salad bowl to make herself a Caesar dressing. I wish they'd shaved her bald, Adrian laughed, and that laugh was like a sharp arrow through Olivia's body, electrocuting her brain and making her tense. She'd been dyed red. You wouldn't believe it. Her hair was the color of copper wire. What about you? My mother-in-law asked, snacking on a ham and cheese roll. I'm sure I kicked her back to the hairdresser's to change her hair color. Yeah, now. So she can pay those barbers and hairdressers again? I made her dye her hair at home. If you look closely, you can even see that not all of her hair is dyed. There's copper coming through, look closely. The guests laughed, eyeing Olivia's hair, and she sat there red with embarrassment. Every time Adrian mocked her, she wanted to get up and leave. One time she had done just that, but then there had been such an enormous scandal. You have no respect for my family. Adrian yelled. They don't come to visit us often enough to be disrespected like this. How could you do this to them? Olivia stood there like a delinquent child with her head down, unable to say anything to her husband. She regretted leaving the table 100 times over. She should have been patient. But this time the cup of patience was overflowing. No, she would not repeat the last attempt and leave the living room with the table she herself had lavishly set and her husband's relatives feasting. But she had to stop this bacchanalia, or it would never end. When the guests were a little tired of laughing at the color of Olivia's hair, poured the liquor into shot glasses and started snacking again, she said. The other day I went to the orphanage where your children live. I looked at them, brought gifts and sweets. You know, they're so cute. Why don't we take them for the weekend? The principal said it's possible. The room fell silent. The room fell silent as they heard Olivia's words. She raised her glass of wine as if nothing had happened. Adrian, let's drink to the children you abandoned. I wish them to find decent parents, more worthy than you. A second later, her husband's heavy hand came down on her cheek. Her face flamed, burning as if it had been scorched by 100 tongues of flame. Adrian reached up, grabbed her hair roughly, and pulled her away from the table. During her happy student years, Olivia fell in love. Kieran was 2 years older than her and had already graduated from the military academy. He was as handsome as God, and when Olivia saw him in his uniform for the first time, the ground swam under her feet. He was tall, slender, with radiant brown eyes that looked like velvet, and he seemed to her like a man of unearthly beauty. They met on May Day in the city park. Olivia and her friend Mel were walking along an alley. The weather lavished the small riverside town with sunshine and warmth. A light breeze fluttered the white silk scarf around Olivia's neck. Suddenly it flew off her shoulders, carried by the wind, and flew away. Oops, the girl caught herself and rushed after him. She ran, and the handkerchief fluttered and fluttered in the wind. As soon as the airflow subsided a little, it dropped to the pavement next to the strange guy. He picked up the silk scarf and held it out to Olivia. "Is it yours?" the boy asked, not even thinking to address the strange girl as you. "Yes, thank you," she replied, and reached out to take the handkerchief, but he suddenly hid it behind his back. "Favorite thing?" the guy asked, smiling an open, slightly joking smile. "Grandma's present ... Can I have it?" "Of course you can," he answered. "Only in exchange for your name." "My name's Olivia. Give me the handkerchief." "That's a beautiful name. Why are you so scared? I won't eat your grandmother's gift after all." The stranger smiled, and Olivia felt so awkward that she was ready to turn around and leave the handkerchief and run out of the park. Seeing her confusion and embarrassment, the guy decided not to torture the girl any longer, spread the silk and gently lowered the handkerchief on Olivia's shoulders. "I'm sorry if I scared you or hurt you." "I didn't mean to," he admitted. "I was just walking alone in the park. It's a holiday, springtime, everyone's happy, having fun, going on rides. I'm Kieran." The guy held out his hand to her, and Olivia instinctively offered hers. His palm was warm. "Can I keep you company, or can you keep me company?" "I see you're out alone," too, Kieran said. "No, I'm with a friend," Olivia said, pointing toward Mel, who was standing nearby. She saw Olivia waving her hand and walked over to her friend and the strange guy. "Girls, let's have some ice cream." Kieran suggested it. "My treat." The company headed towards the summer cafe. Kieran turned out to be very sociable, cheerful, and confident. After ordering ice cream for himself and the girls, he asked, "Are you students?" "Yes, we study at the Teacher Training Institute," Mel answered, flipping her leg over her foot so that her already short skirt almost completely exposed her thigh. Kieran's gaze caught the lacy elastic of the stocking, and Olivia noticed it. Mel's doing her thing. She's going to start seducing Kieran, she thought. Olivia and Mel had been friends since freshman year. They were always together. Everyone around them wondered what could bind these two very different girls so tightly together. Mel was bright, even a little flashy. Long black hair flowing down her back almost to her waist. Fashionable clothes, chiseled figure with a narrow waist and lush breasts attracted the eyes of guys. And the girl knew her strengths and never missed a moment to use her feminine charms. Olivia was the opposite of her. She dressed modestly but tastefully. Her straw-colored hair was always braided or arranged in a bun at the back of her head. Her face was almost completely devoid of makeup, and her unremarkable, ordinary figure. Nothing made her stand out from the other students at the Pedagogical Institute. Mel was just suffocating, dying from the lack of male attention. "I should have gone to law school," she complained. "There are plenty of guys there, but in our group there are 2 nerds with glasses, and the rest are all girls." "Did you see the competition for law school?" Olivia asked her. 38 people per seat. You're retaking your history of literature exam for the 3rd time, and you're still talking about law school. No, Mel, you would definitely fail the entrance exams for lawyers. Her friend understood this, and only sighed, listening to the lectures without much interest. But she found a way to stay visible. At lunchtime, Mel went to the cafeteria of the neighboring building, where mostly boys studied. This way, she often managed to make new acquaintances and even short-term, non-committal romances. When Kieran told a little about himself and the girls learned that he was graduating from the military academy, Mel's interest in the guy grew exponentially. "What do the officers do for fun?" she asked Kieran. "Just like everyone else," the boy answered. "They go to the movies, meet and date girls, go for walks. I like to go to the skating rink in winter and sometimes play hockey with the guys." "For me, sports are a punishment," Mel said, her red lipstick on her chubby lips. "And movies are boring." "What do you do for fun?" Kieran asked. His question was directed at both girls, but he was looking at Olivia. The velvet gaze of his brown eyes made her a little embarrassed. And Mel rambled on. "I love parties. I went to one recently, invited by some guys from the physical education department. Music, wine, rock and roll. We had a great time." "Do you go out?" The question was directed at Olivia, but Mel didn't give her a chance to keep the conversation going. Nah, Olivia here prefers to read romance novels and cram for notes. I barely even got her out today. It's a crime on May holidays when everyone is out enjoying the warmth and spring sunshine. walking around with balloons and flags, having fun, to sit at home and read books. Stop It Olivia tried to stop her, but Mel couldn't be deterred. I also really like picnics, she said cheerfully. How do you feel about going out, Kieran? I'm fine with it, he answered, not taking his eyes off Olivia. Why not, if there's some meat marinated with spices, a bottle of red wine, and good company? It's decided. Let's go to the countryside together, Mel suggested. Olivia looked at her reproachfully. How could she impose on a guy she didn't know? But to her surprise, Kieran agreed very willingly. Next Sunday we can go to the river, he said. You owe us appetizers, we owe you meat and wine. From who, you? Olivia didn't understand. You're the one who calls yourself you? No, of course not, the boy laughed. It just occurred to me to bring a good friend of mine along. They finished their ice cream and walked around the park some more. Kieran asked for Olivia's phone number as he said goodbye to the girls at the exit. The girl took out a small notebook from her purse, wrote down her home number, and tearing out a sheet of paper, gave it to Kieran. Where do you think you're going, girl? Nicole asked Olivia as she watched her granddaughter pick up the cheese and sausage sandwiches and put them in a container. Mel and I and the two boys are going to the river, Grandma Olivia said cheerfully. We're going to grill kebabs and have fun. I'm glad. It's high time you had a rest. You've been sitting at home like a recluse. Olivia threw on a light jacket over a white knit sweater, laced up her sneakers, and gave her grandmother a peck on the cheek. Bye, Grandma, don't miss me, she said. Go with God, dear. The pensioner closed the door behind her granddaughter. Everything that was happening in Olivia's life worried her. Nicole had raised the girl alone since she was 5 years old. The woman's son and his wife had died, and she had gone completely gray overnight. It is not known how Nicole would have survived the death of her only son and his wife if she had not had a granddaughter in her arms. It was not easy, but she raised the girl in care and love. A former teacher of Russian language and literature, she was proud that Olivia followed in her footsteps and also decided to become a teacher. When she graduates from college, she will go to work at the school and help me. Nicole thought, looking out the window as her granddaughter walked across the yard with a small leather backpack on her shoulder. Mel caught up with Olivia on the way. They were walking together to the bus stop where they were supposed to meet the guys. Did you like Kieran? Mel asked her friend. Seems like a nice guy, she replied vaguely. How complicated things are with you, Olivia, exclaimed the girl. What do you mean good? I mean, do you like him as a man? I don't know. I like him a lot. Strong, handsome, sociable, and a military man. I wish I could marry him and become a general's wife. Olivia laughed at her friend's so far-reaching plans. To become a general's wife, you must first marry a lieutenant. I don't remember where I heard this clever phrase. I don't mind. Kieran and his buddy were already waiting for them at the bus stop. They had backpacks and a collapsible barbecue in their hands. Hi, girls, said Kieran. Meet Adrian. Mel. Olivia. Nice to meet you, Adrian smiled, looking at his girlfriends without embarrassment. So are we going? Kieran asked. The company headed towards the forest belt, beyond which the river flowed. The forest path was winding, leading deep into the forest, enticing the boys with the singing of birds and the sound of wind in the pine crowns. The place where the girls were led by the boys was very beautiful. The bank of the river, covered with young green grass, was strewn with dandelions. The rays of the sun were reflected in the water with shining sparkles, shimmering and rippling. The boys gathered wood from the forest and built a fire in a small brazier. The girls spread a blanket on the grass and laid out snacks. While Kieran put the meat on skewers, Adrian poured wine into plastic cups and served it to the girls. Victory Day is coming up, he said. I propose to drink to the military men who gave peace to our country. Great toast, Kieran seconded, but not very polite. Why is that? Adrian didn't understand. Because when there are girls in the company, the first toast is always to Mel ladies. Kieran looked meaningfully at Olivia. She seemed to him the heroine of a fairy tale. Her hair seemed golden in the bright sunlight, and her eyes were even more blue, like water in a river. And we don't pretend to be superior at all, so I suggest we combine the two toasts and drink to the military women who helped the bravest and most courageous men to defeat the enemy. What amazing ingenuity. Mel praised Adrian. The guys drank wine, chatted merrily, and enjoyed a pleasant conversation. The meat turned out very juicy and flavorful. The girls praised Kieran, who had prepared his own marinade for the kebab. Yes, Kieran has many talents, Adrian said. He is exceptional in general. And what is his exclusivity? Mel asked. Tell me, we know almost nothing about him or you. What can I tell you? He's a fine fellow. He'll make a model officer. Kieran is a man of his own principles, which I would not advise you to compromise. What kind of principles? Mel asked. For example, he won't lend money on principle. It's true, girls, you can't ask him to die. I even took offense at him at first. What's wrong with helping a friend? And a friend could spend less money instead of throwing it away left and right. Adrian smiled and rebuked Kieran for his wastefulness. He also believes that marriages are made for great and pure love. Isn't it? Kira argued with his friend. How can you create a strong family if you don't love a person? Come on, Adrian grumbled. Love is pure chemistry. You meet someone, look into his eyes, and a chemical reaction takes place. And then? And what next? Mel looked at the boy who spoke so boldly about love. And then? The brain shuts down, and uncontrollable things happen. Adrian rolled his eyes amusedly. Euphoria engulfs two people who are drowning in each other's arms. And then children. Common life, constant lack of money, snot, diapers, work, pots and pans, laundry. In short, this is how what in our world is called family life begins. Everyone laughed merrily at the theatricality of Adrian's speech. He was generally good at joking, easily picking up on any topic, and was cheerful throughout the picnic. Kieran, on the other hand, seemed thoughtful. He was watching Olivia very closely. Noticing this, she began to feel uncomfortable. She stood up and walked toward the river, squatting down and touching the water with her hand. Cold? She heard Kieran's voice behind her. Olivia stood up and turned around. Not really, but it's too early to swim. Kieran Adrian shouted, Can't you swim across the river? What do you want to bet? Kieran asked. Easy. Adrian approached his friend. Or can't you do it? The boy started to take off his sweater and then his jeans. Kieran looked at Adrian, squinting his eyes. I accept the challenge, he finally answered and began pulling off his clothes. Guys, just kidding. That's enough. Olivia was worried. The water is so cold, you'll catch a cold. Come on, Olivia. The boys want to show who's braver and stronger. Let them fight for the victory. Mel stood next to her, excited for the exciting competition. What's the prize for the winner? Adrian asked. A kiss, of course. Without even thinking about it, the girl replied. Let's get this over with. Olivia was still trying to talk the boys out of this crazy idea. The river was small, but it was dangerous to stay in the cold water for long. Kieran, you seem like a sensible man. Please drop the argument. The guy came so close to her that she could hear him breathing. Olivia's heart sank. Don't be afraid of anything. I'll swim across, he said quietly and lightly touched the girl's cheek with his fingers. Olivia froze, feeling the color spill down her cheeks, but Kieran was already walking toward the water. He and Adrian jumped into the water and swam to the opposite shore. The girls froze in impatience, wondering when they would get there and not have to worry. At one point, Adrian pulled ahead, but Kieran quickly caught up with him and overtook him, and then his head disappeared beneath the surface of the water. Olivia gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. He drowned, Mel. No, it'll come out, trust me, she said, staring off into the distance, her hand over her eyes as she shielded her eyes from the glare of the sun. Where are you? Kieran, show yourself already. But Kieran was nowhere to be seen. The minutes dragged by slowly. It seemed like an eternity had passed when the boy's head appeared on the surface. He was 10 or 15 meters ahead of Adrian and reached the shore very quickly. Kieran stepped onto dry land and waved to the girls who didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the few minutes it took for the boy to disappear under the water, they had become very nervous. Fool Olivia said quietly. Cool. Shaking her head, Mel said. When Adrian also appeared on the opposite bank, the girls had already calmed down. They saw the friends shake hands and walk along the bank toward the automobile bridge. After about an hour, they returned to the picnic site. Olivia was packing her things, empty containers and dishes into her backpack. Her whole demeanor showed that she was upset, hurt, and about to leave, but Kieran didn't seem to notice. "Where's my prize?" he asked cheerfully. "I'm waiting for a kiss." Olivia saw Mel jump up to him, put her arms around his neck, and kissed him right on the lips. "You're a real hero," said the girl enthusiastically. "Olivia, aren't you going to kiss the winner?" Kieran asked, but the girl only took her backpack in her hands and walked towards the forest. She decided to leave. Her head was a little dizzy from the wine she'd drunk, and she was beginning to ache from the experience. Olivia stepped out onto the path they'd taken to the shore and headed into the woods with a determined stride. She was angry at the guys who'd made her worry, at Milka, who could kiss a guy she didn't know so easily, at herself for being shy and timid. The girl didn't notice that she had stumbled and twisted her foot. A sharp pain made her crouch on the ground. Olivia felt her ankle, her hands touching it painfully. She tried to get up but immediately sat back down, groaning in pain and helplessness. She couldn't walk any further. Olivia realized she had gone too far to call for help. The boys wouldn't hear her voice in the thicket of centuries-old pines. Olivia cried. "Why do I always have bad luck?" she thought. The day had started out so well, and then the boys had gotten into this stupid contest and she was in such a bad mood. And now her leg. Olivia heard the crunch of twigs and turned around. Kieran was walking down the path. When he saw the girl, he ran up to her. "Olivia, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" "I twisted my leg. It hurt," she complained, wiping her tears and sniffling her nose. "Let me see," he said, lifted the pant leg on her ankle and touched it with his hand. Olivia froze as she felt his touch. It excited her. She jerked her foot away, startled by the sensation, and moaned again. "I see," said Kieran. "Can you stand up?" He lifted her to her feet, then picked her up and carried her down the path in his arms. Kieran's strong arms cradled Olivia so tightly that she didn't even resist, trusting him. Kieran carried Olivia all the way to the house, and then lifted her, carrying her in his arms, to the 4th floor. Grandmother opened the door. "Oh my God, what happened?" She splayed her hands, clearing the passage. "I twisted my leg," Grandma Olivia replied. Kieran walked into the room and sat her down on the couch. Sweat was beading on his forehead. Only now did Olivia realize how much strength it had taken for him to come all this way carrying her. "We should call an ambulance," Nicole said worriedly. "Don't," the boy stopped her. "Do you have a bandage?" It was in the medicine cabinet somewhere. Nicole opened the cupboard and pulled out the shoebox that held the medicine. A moment later, Kieran was applying a tight bandage to Olivia's ankle. "I'll fix the leg and you just keep it off for a few days and the pain will go away," he said, cutting the tip of the bandage. "Grandma, I forgot to introduce you." Olivia remembered that she hadn't even introduced her savior to her grandmother. "This is Kieran. We went on a picnic together." "I'm Nicole." Grandma smiled. "Why didn't you look after Olivia, Kieran?" The boy looked embarrassed but didn't lower his eyes, just looked at Olivia. "It's my own fault, Grandma," she said. "Now I'll stay at home all the holidays." A boiling kettle whistled longingly in the kitchen. "Young man, I'll ask you to move the table to the couch, and I'll bring everything to tea," Nicole said, nodding at the coffee table in the corner. "I'll make tea with strawberry jam for the hero and savior. Do you like strawberry jam?" "I love it," Kieran replied cheerfully. A few minutes later, they were having tea. Kieran could see how proud Nicole was of her granddaughter. She gladly pulled out an album and showed him Olivia's baby pictures, which embarrassed the girl. "Look, Kieran, how funny she is here with the huge bows," Grandma said, pointing her finger at the black and white picture. I took her to the first grade, and here we went to the sea with her. And this is the graduation. Isn't she beautiful?" Kieran nodded, looking at the picture of a pretty girl with a braid over her shoulder. They chatted some more, and Kieran got ready to leave. "Can I come visit you sometime? To see how your leg is?" he asked Olivia. "Come, I'll be waiting," she said it so easily, so naturally, as if she and Kieran were old friends. Olivia wished he would come and see her. And when the grandmother slammed the door behind the boy and came back into the room, she found her granddaughter smiling. She was sitting with her legs stretched out and resting it on the stool Kieran had carefully placed before he left. In her hands was a teddy bear, once given to her by her parents. "Are you keeping a secret with your favorite teddy bear?" Nicole asked, smiling. "Don't you want to share it with me?" "With what?" "Like how and where did you meet this Kieran guy?" "In the park, Grandma. Why didn't you like him?" The girl was suddenly worried, afraid that her grandmother would find faults in Kieran. "Not at all," replied the pensioner. "Nice guy. Have a good time, baby." Nicole left the room, closing the door behind her. After a while, Olivia heard her humming something in the kitchen. Grandma always sang when she put the dough in, so it's going to be pies tonight, Olivia thought, closed her eyes, and fell into a happy, deep sleep. The next day she waited for a call from Kieran, but he didn't call. Busy, probably, Olivia thought. She spent the rest of the day reading. In the evening, Mel dropped by. As usual, brightly painted in a miniskirt and a blouse with a décolletage that showed off her ample breasts, she made the quiet atmosphere of the apartment noisy and cheerful. "It's your own fault," she reprimanded Olivia for leaving the picnic, twirling in front of the mirror. "If you'd stayed with us, none of this would have happened. Thank Kieran for finding you so quickly." "Yeah, he's good," Olivia said thoughtfully. Mel looked at her carefully. "Hey girlfriend, you're not in love, are you?" she asked with a sly squint of her eyes. "I didn't want to be in love with you," Olivia said, and I felt her cheeks reddening. "Kieran's a really nice guy, the kind of guy you could fall in love with. He brought me home, sat me right here, bandaged my leg." "Well, Adrian's just as good," Mel said with her arms at her sides. "He walked me home, too, and came to visit." "He was visiting you?" Olivia wondered. "Why?" "We still have some wine left." Mel plopped down on the couch with her friend and suddenly covered her face with her hands. "Olivia, we had everything with him. Everything. He left me just before morning." Olivia gawked at her friend. Mel, of course, was a flighty girl who did crazy things all the time, but to sleep with a guy they'd just met a few hours ago. Olivia couldn't get her head around that. "Did he confess his love to you?" she asked Mel, hoping that at least it wasn't just a fling under the influence of good mood and alcohol, but the beginning of a long and serious relationship. "Are you two together now?" "I don't know." Mel took her hands away from her face and stared thoughtfully at the TV. "I don't know." Mel removed her palms from her face and stared thoughtfully at the TV. "Then why did you let him in?" "What's the big deal? You can't die from lack of male affection. As you know, it's a fish out of water." "What cancer? What fish? What are you talking about?" Olivia shrieked. "If he slept with you, he must be serious." "Yeah, you think Mishka from gym class had intentions too? And Kolka from law school? If all the guys I slept with married me, I'd be a sultaness with my own harem of men." Mel and Olivia laughed. Indeed, the boys were paying attention to the bright and cheerful Mel, and she was in no hurry to drive them away from her. But Adrian had more than caught Olivia's friend's eye. She really wanted to continue her relationship with him and maybe even get married. However, Adrian simply kissed Mel on the cheek and said bye without saying anything about a new meeting, but she hoped that he would call and ask her out on a date. Olivia and Nicole were going to spend Victory Day watching movies. There were a lot of old and new war movies on the program. They sat comfortably on the couch, teacups and cakes on the table in front of them. Olivia didn't feel like going outside, even though she and her grandmother went to watch the parade in the town square every year. And this time, Nicole was feeling healthy. "I'd better stay home and watch the parade on TV," she said to Olivia. "Do you think your Kieran is marching in the parade now?" "Why is he mine?" Olivia was outraged. He hadn't even called in a week. Okay, she'll worry, call again, or come over, hello, here I am. Nicole smiled. Her girl seemed to really miss her new acquaintance. Olivia and her grandmother hadn't even had a cup of tea yet when the doorbell rang in their apartment. I'll get it, she said. Her leg wasn't aching anymore, and Olivia was able to get around the house just fine. She opened the door and was stunned. Kieran stood on the threshold. He was so handsome, and handsome in his military uniform, smiling so charmingly that Olivia couldn't hide her joy. Hey, he said. Happy holidays. Kieran handed Olivia the box of cake. She took it and stood there, smiling. Can I come in? Kieran asked, and Olivia snapped out of her stupor and led him into the hallway. Grandma, she shouted, we have guests. Come in, we're having tea, you're just in time. Nicole looked out of the room. Young man, you're on parade today. She gave him an approving glance. And on parade, and on parade. Laughed the boy. We've been preparing for the festive march all week, and we haven't had time to visit you at all. We're not offended, the pensioner waved her hand, although someone here missed you very much. Bah, Olivia yanked her back. What a BA. Go to the kitchen. Get another cup and saucer for our wonderful guest. We'll celebrate Victory Day. Olivia's grandmother definitely liked Kieran. She suddenly sounded very tired and sent her granddaughter and her boyfriend out for a walk. I'll lie down for a while, rest in silence, and you go, there are people having fun. Artists probably perform. Kieran and Olivia walked around the city until late afternoon. They watched the performance of various amateur groups, went on rides in the park, and fed the ducks on the pond. The boy and girl did not even notice how it got dark outside, and citizens began to gather on the square to watch the fireworks. Olivia looked at the colorful scatterings with her head tilted back, and Kieran couldn't take his eyes off her delighted face. He mentally said, how beautiful you are, Olivia, and it turned out he'd said it out loud. Olivia looked from the night sky, lit up by the salutes, to Kieran. What did you say? She asked. I didn't quite hear it well. I love you, Kieran said, and kissed her on the lips. When she got home, Olivia was over the moon. Her grandmother was watching TV, but when her granddaughter appeared in the doorway, she turned it off by pressing a button on the remote control. Grandma Olivia rushed over to Nicole and hugged her. I'm so happy you can't even imagine. Why can't I? Yes, I can. You think I wasn't in love? Kieran told me he loved me. He's a good guy, he won't hurt you, said Grandma. Don't hurt him either. Appreciate what you have between you. It was a hot summer, with almost no rain at all. The residents of the city were suffering from the heat, escaping the scorching rays in the shade of trees, in parks near fountains, and on the river bank. The forecasters' predictions were disappointing. The heat would last for several more weeks. Would you like some ice cream? Kieran asked Olivia. I can't eat it anymore. She looked at the boy with a pleading look. Every day only ice cream saves me from this heat. Do you want to go somewhere? Kieran asked. Like where? Kieran had a vacation after graduating from the academy, and Olivia was on vacation. They were completely free and spent almost all their time together, dreaming about the future, making plans together. If you want, we could go north, Kieran suggested, and Olivia couldn't tell if he was joking or serious. To the polar bears, she laughed. We can go to the south. We will swim in the sea and sunbathe on the beach under the southern sun, offered another option, beloved girl. Kieran, the words sun, tan, beach make my eye twitch. Well, I'm sorry, but I just want somewhere to be with you, you know. So that there was no one else at all, he hugged and kissed the girl. Come on, let's go to a campground. There is a great place outside the city. There are houses, forest, river. It's a good idea, Olivia agreed, but she felt a sudden fear, a bad feeling, and clung tighter to Kieran. The next day, the two of them took an electric train out of town. The administrator of the camp met them at the gate. I'll show you around, the young man said, inviting you to follow him. I understand you booked a cabin away from everyone else, so I left you that apartment over there. He pointed toward the forest and led Olivia and Kieran to their cabin. It was small, surrounded by pine trees. There was one large room with a couch, a table, and a large bed. "Here is the tea station." The administrator showed a kettle and a box with tea bags. "You can use it. The canteen is open on schedule. You can buy drinks, pastries, some food from morning till evening in the cafeteria. After dinner there is dancing on the grounds. Come along if you want to have fun. Oh yeah, linens are in the closet. Towels are there too. Make yourself comfortable, and if you need anything, call me." The young man left, remembering to close the door behind him. Olivia sighed, looking around. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "To walk, rest, and enjoy each other," Kieran answered. He wanted them to remember the weekend spent at the camping site, because he was going to say the most important words to his favorite girl. "I feel uneasy," Olivia said quietly. "Worried about Grandma? Thinking about how she's going to be alone without you?" "I don't know. Something just came up." "Well, I'll try to take your mind off your sad feelings," said Kieran. "The first item on our cultural program is a trip to the river." They spent the whole day walking through the woods, boating on the river, swimming in water as warm as milk. Olivia and Kieran even skipped lunch, eating the pies that the caring Nicole had put in her bag. When it got dark, the boy and the girl sat on a bench near their cabin, admiring the stars and kissing. Kieran hesitated to tell Olivia the important news, afraid that she would be upset. "Is something bothering you?" Olivia noticed her lover's condition. "Yeah, we're going to have to break up." The girl pulled back and looked into Kieran's eyes, and he realized he'd picked the wrong words. No, you misunderstood. I'm going on a business trip." "For how long?" Olivia asked. "I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe a year." The girl knew that there was a military conflict in one of the friendly countries, and that troops were being sent there to settle the unrest. But she had never thought that it would affect her and Kieran. "When?" Olivia asked, hoping that the moment of parting wouldn't come soon enough. "The day after tomorrow," the boy lowered his head. "If you only knew how hard it would be for me to leave you, I'd go crazy." Olivia put her palms to his face and looked into his eyes with a loving gaze full of concern, understanding, tenderness. "When I come back, you and I will get married. I promise you." "I love you very much," she said quietly, almost in a whisper, and then added, "Let's go." Olivia took Kieran's hand and led him into the house. She slowly undid the buttons of her dress and slid it to the floor, revealing a slender body in white lace lingerie. "Give me this night," Olivia said. "I'll be waiting for you, remembering every moment, every second." The lovers didn't sleep a wink until morning. They caressed each other again and again, plunging into the abyss of passion. 2 months had passed. Olivia stood in the bathroom mirror and looked at her face. Blue circles under her eyes, sunken cheeks, pale skin. She didn't look good. She moved her gaze to the sink, where a pregnancy test lay on the edge. 2 stripes were clearly visible against the white background. She was going to have a baby, a part of the person she loved. But Olivia was more worried than happy. Kieran hadn't sent a single letter, and she'd checked the mailbox several times each day. There were no phone calls, no messages either. Once, when she met Adrian, Kieran's friend, on the street, Olivia asked him if he had any news. But the guy shook his head, for some reason averting his gaze. The girl understood that in hot spots. There was no time to think about girls and love relationships, but it was possible to find a minute to scribble a couple of lines, "Everything is fine. I love you. I miss you." And now this pregnancy. Olivia thought about how to tell her grandmother so she wouldn't worry her too much. Nicole had been complaining more and more lately about her heart and high blood pressure. Olivia had called the ambulance again yesterday, and the doctors had insisted on hospitalization, but Grandma had flatly refused. "I will die at home, not in a government bed," she said, barely able to move her tongue, and signed her refusal with a weak hand. When she left for the institute, Olivia was always worried whether something had happened at home or how her grandmother was doing. The anxiety for her nearest and dearest people kept her from concentrating on the lectures. Mel was always trying to get Olivia to wake up. "Wake up, everyone's looking at you," she said as the entire audience stared at the girl, who had her eyes closed and was mumbling something under her breath. Olivia's friend sighed and shook her head. "You can't torture yourself like this." But there was no shadow of the old Olivia, the Olivia with whom they'd gone out in the evenings, shared secrets and made plans for the future. Olivia seemed petrified. "Olivia, what took you so long in the bathroom?" she heard Nicole's voice. "Breakfast is on the table. Hurry up or you'll be late for school." Olivia sat down at the table and reached for a sandwich. But when she felt a nasty lump in her throat, she put the piece of loaf with cheese and sausage back on the plate. After she drank her coffee, she kissed her grandmother and walked out the door. On the way to the institute, the girl met her friend. Mel stood near the entrance to the building and smoked a cigarette. When she saw Olivia, she waved at her. "There won't be a first class," Mel said. "The teacher's sick, so we can go shopping." She tossed the cigarette butt away and slung her bag over her shoulder. She noticed that Olivia was in no mood again. Mel understood that she missed Kieran, that she was in love, that she was in love, that she was waiting to hear from him, but she thought she shouldn't be so upset. "Nothing again?" she asked her friend. "No, there's other news though." "Well, what's the news?" Mel tugged on Olivia's arm. "I'm pregnant." The girl pulled a test out of her purse and showed it to her friend. "Shit, how could you do that?" Mel said, surprised and frustrated. "How?" Olivia didn't understand. "Careless, that's how." Mel handed the test back to Olivia and reached for the pack of cigarettes that was sticking out of the pocket of her bag. "Stop smoking," Mel, her friend, told her. "I just threw it out." "I'm allowed. I'm not pregnant, ... thank God." "What are you going to do? You're not going to have a baby alone with no husband, no money and no education, are you?" "I'm going to," Olivia said quietly. "You can't kill a child for lack of money and unfinished education. It wasn't his fault." "Oh, come on." Mel waved her off. "What baby? There's a little pea in there yet. Don't be a fool. I have a phone number of a good friend. She will arrange everything, but you'll have to pay. Do you have money?" Olivia was silent, absorbed in herself. She heard her friend's words, but they sounded distant, barely audible. "I said I had money to pay for the abortion." Mel shook Olivia's arm, trying to shake her out of her stupor. "I'm not having an abortion," Olivia said. "It's my and Kieran's baby. It has to be born." "You're an idiot," Mel exclaimed. "Where's your Kieran?" "No? And what makes you think he wants that baby? Did he ask you to bear him children? Or maybe he promised to marry you?" "Kieran will come back and everything will be fine. And I will give birth and wait with the baby for him." In the evening, Nicole and Olivia watched TV together. The girl thought about how to present the news so that her grandmother wouldn't get too excited, but she didn't even have to say anything. Nicole, who had raised her granddaughter since she was a little girl, knew her too well. "Are you thinking about how to tell me about the delay?" she asked, keeping her eyes on the TV screen. Olivia was silent. Her grandmother's foresight, her gift of sensing the state of her beloved granddaughter, always amazed the girl. "You're worried," Olivia, wondering what to do. How to move on, right? "Okay, Grandma. But and it is possible not to think, but just to live. You should not try to rewrite your destiny. It is written long before the birth of any person by someone from above. You are doing a thankless job by racking your brains, doubting, thinking over every next step." "What should I do, Grandma?" Olivia suddenly put her head down on Nicole's shoulder, and Nicole put her arms around her and stroked her head. "Just to live," the pensioner replied calmly. "To live and enjoy every new day." "What do you think Kieran would say if he found out we were having a baby together?" Olivia asked, looking into Nina Petrovna's eyes. "I would say the same thing. You have to live and raise a child, love those who deserve it, and make each of their days better, happier." "I'm scared." "Don't worry, you'll give birth by the end of the course. You'll be with your baby all summer, and then I'll help you. I'll take care of the baby while you're at the institute. Then you'll get your diploma, and that's it." "What if Kieran doesn't accept the baby?" "Don't think about it. It's going to be okay." The new year was approaching. The streets of the city were covered with illuminations. A huge Christmas tree was put up in the center, shining with thousands of lights, and the counters of stores were bursting with New Year's goods clappers, sparklers, glittering balls, and soft toys. Olivia and Nicole pulled out a plastic Christmas tree and began to decorate it. "Your parents brought this tree back from vacation," my grandmother recalled. "Now it is no longer fashionable, but back then few people had such trees. Don't throw it away when I die. Let it be a memory." "Don't talk. She's going to die," Olivia said, half jokingly, half seriously. "Have you forgotten how you promised to help me with the baby?" "It's not like I'm going to die next year," Nicole laughed. The news was on the television. The announcer, in an elegant blue suit and tie, was saying something, but Olivia wasn't listening, only catching some of the phrases. Suddenly she shouted, "BA, turn up the sound," and she got off the stool she had climbed on to put a star on top of the tree. "More than 50 of our soldiers and officers are missing. Their fate is still unknown." In other news,
Grabbing the remote, Olivia began to press the buttons, switching channels, hoping to find a newscast somewhere else. But in vain. The end of a sentence the newscaster said made her uneasy. Apparently they were talking about the military sent to settle a localized conflict. Kieran could have been there. That explained why there were no letters or messages from the boy.
Olivia sat down on the couch, her heart racing. She reached for the table where the pitcher of water stood, but suddenly passed out. I'm awake. A man in a white coat leaned over Olga. "How do you feel?" "It's fine," Olivia said, trying to get up from the couch.
"You're lying down. You don't have to get up." The doctor returned her to the pillow with a gentle but insistent motion of his hand. "You're lying down." The doctor gently but insistently moved his hand back to her pillow.
"What's wrong with me?" "I understand that you were worried and fainted. There is no threat of abortion, but I would recommend that you lie down, rest, and don't be nervous. Don't watch TV. It's only bad for you." The doctor smiled. "Better listen to music." Which one? Olivia didn't understand.
"Anything that gives you pleasure. Turn around, we'll give you a shot. It's a sedative, don't worry."
The EMT and paramedic said goodbye to Olivia and Nicole, wished them health and a happy new year, and left. "You scared me." Girl grandma shook her head. She covered her with a blanket, turned on the wall lamp, and sat down in the armchair. "Grandmother, do you think he's missing too?" Olivia asked. "We don't know, Mel. Let's hope all is well. Your Kieran comes back." By the end of winter, Olivia was no longer hiding her position. Her belly was clearly protruding, growing larger with each passing week. She carried the pregnancy easily, successfully passing her classes and studying for exams. And when the baby kicked her for the first time with its little foot, she circled the significant day in her grandmother's wall calendar with a red felt-tip pen. There was still no word from Kieran.
"Mel, can you ask Adrian to ask around about Kieran amongst his contacts? They went to school together, so maybe someone knows something?" Olivia asked her friend.
Adrian who? Mel didn't immediately realize who her friend was talking about. "Oh, that Adrian. I haven't seen him for a long time."
"What? Aren't you two together?" Olivia wondered. "I thought."
"What's there to think about? We slept together a few times, and then I got bored with him. He doesn't take me to a restaurant, he doesn't take me out, he doesn't have much money, he doesn't give me presents. I like it better with Vincent from journalism school. You know what kind of car he has? It's so hot." Mel continued to talk about her new lover, and Olivia wondered if she should go to the academy herself. Maybe they knew something about her lover. The next day she was already standing at the checkpoint. The officer on duty demanded a pass, which the girl, of course, did not have. Not without a pass, he kept saying the same thing when Olivia asked him to let her through. "I need to know about one man," she begged. "He was sent on a business trip, and I haven't heard from him in 6 months. I can't help you. If you get a pass, I'll let you in, but in the meantime, get out of here. You're not supposed to be here." Olivia turned and walked away, but the clerk suddenly called out to her. "Girl, try to go to the military enlistment office. They should know about everyone who." Well, you know where. Thank you, Olivia thanked him, and she headed off to the enlistment office. As she got on the bus, she wondered why she hadn't thought of it before. Only the military could tell what happened to those who were sent on a business trip. And who will you be to him? The captain asked Olivia in the duty room through a window with an iron grill.
The girl is confused. She's basically nobody to him. A close acquaintance, you know? We only give information about military personnel to relatives. The captain looked at her with a cold stare. It seemed that even Olivine's pleading eyes couldn't break through that ice block.
The girl came out of the building. A woman was sobbing nearby, trying to comfort her, and a young man was standing nearby. Did something happen to you? Olivia asked. Should I call an ambulance? The guy looked at her, shook his head. No, I called a cab. It's coming. I'm taking my mom home. My brother died on a business trip in a hot spot. We just found out. Olivia's legs felt woozy. What if Kieran did too? She squeezed her eyes shut. No, not that. He was fine. She would feel it. She couldn't help but feel it.
Completely frustrated, Olivia returned home. Nicole was lying on the couch. A tonometer and several packets of pills on a stool next to her.
Grandma, what? Blood pressure. Olivia rushed to her grandmother. Yes, baby, Grandma said quietly. I've had some medicine. It'll make me feel better. I'll call the doctors.
Don't bother people, Nicole stopped her. It'll pass.
You tell me if it gets worse, okay? Said the girl. I'll tell you to go eat. There's soup on the stove and cutlets. Go on, Mel. Nicole closed her eyes. Olivia adjusted the blanket and went into the kitchen. She was really hungry. The girl heated up some soup, cut off a few slices of fresh bread. Having eaten quietly, she washed the dishes behind her. Trying not to make any noise, Olivia tiptoed into the room where her grandmother slept. With a glance at the old woman, she walked to her room and lay down. Tired from the long walk, Olivia fell into a deep sleep very quickly. When she opened her eyes, it was already dark outside the window. The girl got up, drew the curtains, and turned on the light in the room. Her grandmother must still be asleep because no sounds were heard. Olivia went into her room and called out. "Bah, are you asleep?" There was no answer.
Olivia moved closer to Nicole and took her hand. The palm was icy, lifeless.
"Granny, wake up, Granny." The girl touched her cheeks, shoulders, shook her arm, but the old woman didn't show any signs of life. Olivia called an ambulance and the doctors diagnosed a heart attack. After the grandmother was taken to the morgue, the girl called a friend. "Mel, please come, please. Grandma's dead," she said quietly. In half an hour, Mel was already sitting next to her, hugging Olivia. She didn't cry, she just wanted someone to be there for her. And she had no one else but Mel and Kieran.
A month had passed since his grandmother's death. Olivia was coming home from the institute. From week to week, it was already time for her to give birth. The women's clinic even suggested that she go to the maternity hospital.
"You'll take vitamins, get drips, prepare your uterus for labor," the midwife told her. But Olivia refused. She needed to take as many credits as possible, close all her debts at the institute, and consult with her academic assistant about whether she should take a sabbatical or whether she could write and defend her diploma without a year's break. Thinking about all this, Olivia didn't notice when a beautiful blue foreign car pulled up next to her and a familiar male voice called her name. "Olivia, hi. Don't you recognize any old friends?" The girl slowed down and turned her head at the voice. Adrian jumped out of the car. He looked stunning: black suit, snow-white shirt, shined shoes. "Hi, Adrian. What a meeting." Olivia rejoiced. She hadn't seen Kieran's friend in a long time. The thought flashed through her mind that maybe he knew something about her lover. "What's up? How's life?" Adrian asked, hugging Olivia lightly around the shoulders. "I see you're doing well. When are you due?" "Soon enough." "Come on. I'll give you a ride," Adrian offered and pulled the girl by the arm. Olivia tried to refuse, saying it was good for her to walk, but Adrian was adamant. He opened the car door and gently placed Olivia in the front seat. then walked around to the driver's seat. "Shall we?" He was still as cheerful as the first time Olivia had seen Adrian. "How are you, Olivia?" Adrian asked, turning onto the avenue. "I know about your grandmother, my condolences." "Thank you. I'm fine. I'm going into labor any day now. The baby is kicking so much I can't take it anymore. And I can't wait to see him." Adrian smiled and nodded his head, looking at the road. "How are you doing?" Olivia asked him. "Working," the guy replied uncertainly. "Did I? I thought you were going to serve. I haven't seen you in a long time. I thought you'd been assigned somewhere." "That's what happened. They were going to send him to the Caucasus," Adrian replied. "My father got involved. He gave someone some money and put him to work for his old friend's company as head of security."
Do they pay well? Olivia didn't know why she'd asked that question, probably just to keep the conversation going.
"I'm fine. I have enough to live on," Adrian replied. "Here we are." The car stopped in the driveway. The guy looked at the girl, smiled. "Will you invite me for tea? Let's have a little chat." "Come on." "I don't really have anything for tea," Olivia said. "You don't have to." Adrian opened the door, helped Olivia out of the car, and with a click of the remote, locked the car doors. They reached the 4th floor and Olivia pulled her keys out of her purse. "How do you get up to the floor with a belly like that?" "It must be hard, isn't it?" Adrian asked. "And if you're carrying bags when you come from the store?" "I don't store much," Olivia said, smiling. "Why?" "I don't need much, and I don't have much money." "You can't get by on a scholarship, even if it's an extra one." She opened the door and invited Adrian in. The guy was visiting Olivia for the first time. He noticed that the girl didn't live very well. And where would the wealth come from? At least her grandmother used to get a pension every month, but now it's become difficult. Adrian walked around the apartment. The furniture was old, but well maintained. The wallpaper had not been reglued for a long time, and the television set. Such things were rarely found in the apartments of city dwellers. "I'll put the kettle on now," Olivia said. Pouring tea into cups, she asked Adrian, "Have you heard anything about Kieran?" The boy looked at Olivia carefully. Beautiful, even despite her huge belly, she looked at him, trying to hide her anxiety. She wasn't very good at it. "I didn't want to bring it up with you first, but I knew you would." Olivia sat on a stool, stirring her tea slowly with a spoon, her head bowed slightly. Her bangs fell over her eyes, and she fixed them with a light hand. Adrian had a hard time fighting the urge to run his hand through those straw-colored curls. He liked Olivia a lot.
Do you know anything about him? Olivia looked up at the boy.
"Not specifically about him," Adrian replied. "But they say that the whole company was killed."
Olivia covered her mouth with the palm of her hand to keep from shrieking.
"This can't be. I believe in the best, too. After all, Kira and I were friends. I went to the military enlistment office. They said they don't give information to strangers. And there was a woman crying. Her son had been killed on that business trip. They don't disclose information so as not to worry people," Adrian said sadly, but rumors spread faster than television news. "Can your father find out anything about Kieran through his own channels?" Olivia dared to ask Adrian. She knew that his father was not the last man in town, had extensive, very useful connections.
I'll ask Olivia. I promise. Adrian finished his tea and got ready to leave. I gotta go. Business. Can I write down your phone number and you can keep mine? In case you need it.
Of course, Olivia said with hope in her voice. Maybe Adrian would know something and call her. They exchanged phone numbers and the guy left. Olivia sat down on the couch thinking. They were friends, but they were very different.
The next day, Olivia's phone rang. She was about to go to bed, having just gotten out of the shower.
"I'm listening," she replied. "Hi, it's Adrian." She heard the phone ring. Olivia's heart raced, wondering if he'd found out something about Kieran.
Yes, Adrian, go ahead. Are you still awake? Can I come in? I'm right here, at your doorstep.
Sure, come on up, Olivia said, and she hurried to throw on a robe over her nightgown. Adrian walked into the hallway carrying 2 huge bags and pulled them in front of the girl. Here, the humanitarian aid has reached you. Smiling happily, he said.
The boy took off his shoes and strode into the kitchen. Olivia watched in amazement as he put meat, sausage, cottage cheese, milk, candy, canned goods, several kinds of cheese, juices, tea, coffee. The groceries didn't fit on the table anymore, but he kept putting them out of the bags.
What is it, Adrian? The girl asked in surprise. I told you, humanitarian aid. After finishing the groceries, he sat down on a stool. I didn't ask. Why?
Olivia, I just wanted to help you and make you happy, Adrian said. His words sounded sincere, kind, and the smile stayed on his face. Olivia wanted to scold him at first to make him take it all back, but when she saw how pleased he was to do something for her, she melted. Well, let me at least give you some tea, she said, turning on the gas stove and filling the kettle with water.
Can we have coffee? Adrian asked. I have to be on duty with my men until morning today. The chief has come up with some kind of reinforcement, so we'll be waiting for the enemies until morning.
What enemies? Olivia didn't understand. She was even a little worried. I'm just kidding, the boy said. They just asked me to be on duty until morning.
They drank tea and talked, but Olivia waited for Adrian to find out something about Kieran and tell her. Finally, when she couldn't bear it, she asked him directly. The boy grew sad for a moment. He seemed to be struggling to find his words.
You don't have to wait for Kieran anymore, Olivia, he said finally. No one has any other information. It's all confirmed.
What was confirmed? Olivia didn't want to believe the worst thing that could happen to her lover. Kieran is gone. In one ravine, our military found more than 20 decapitated bodies, officially recognized as the bodies of dead men from Kieran's company. I'm sorry.
Olivia covered her face with her hands, crying bitterly. Adrian stood up, walked over to her, and put his arm around her shoulders. Suddenly she cried out, and clutched her stomach. Oh, Mummy. It hurts, Olivia moaned. Oh, I think I'm in labor. I'll call an ambulance. Adrian frantically searched for his phone. No, I'd rather drive myself. It would be quicker that way. He helped the girl get dressed and went down to the car, calming her down, saying some ridiculous words that everything would be fine soon, at the same time cursing at the careless drivers who were obstructing the traffic. Adrian pressed the gas pedal. Soon the car entered the courtyard of the maternity hospital and slowed down at the steps. The boy jumped out, opened the door to help Olivia, and gently led her into the waiting room.
Anybody there? He shouted. There's a girl in labor here. On a sunny April morning, Olivia sat in a hospital bed holding her baby boy. The baby had been born strong and healthy. Black hairs tousled on his head, just like Daddy, Olivia thought as she stroked her son, holding him to her chest. Her heart was full of love for this little man, the most dear to her in the world. The door to the room opened and a nurse came in. She was holding a huge bouquet of roses in a bag. Pravushina, Olivia, there's a message for you, said an old woman. Look at the flowers they're carrying for moms now, 100 of them in a bouquet. In the past, fathers would come to the window, pick daisies and dandelions from the flower beds, and their grandmothers would rejoice, as if they had brought flowers. They loved them. Nanechka laughed, put the bouquet on the nightstand, and put the bag on her neighbor's nightstand.
Who's it from? Olivia asked.
A representative, in a suit, said that the note was in the bouquet, but he went under the windows, it seems, said the nurse.
Olivia put the baby in the cuvette and herself took a small card out of the bouquet of roses. Congratulations on your son. Look out the window, she read the message, written in beautiful, even handwriting. Adjusting the robe across her chest, Olivia walked over to the windowsill. A smiling Adrian was standing below. When he saw the girl, he waved his arms. The guy shouted something, but Olivia could hardly hear anything. The windows in the ward were closed. Then Adrian ran to the car and opened the trunk. From there, he pulled out a luxurious, very expensive baby stroller, blue in color. But
Olivia watched in amazement as he showed her the different positions: a stroller for stroller sleep, a car cradle, a carrier, and this is how you can carry a baby when they're already sitting up. Suddenly, Adrian slipped his hand into his pocket and showed Olivia his cell phone. He dialed her number, and the room resounded with the sound of an incoming call. "Why did you spend so much money?" Olivia asked with a laugh. "It's a very expensive stroller. I wouldn't spare anything for your baby. He'll ride like a real king."
"Thank you so much," Olivia thanked him. For what?
"For everything." Adrian looked at her and was silent. Skinny, pale after childbirth, in her hospital gown, she was so touching, so real, so tender, so desirable. "I'm right here. Call me if you need me," he said calmly, emotionless. And then he was gone. Adrian waved to Olivia, got in his car, and drove out of the hospital yard. The girl looked thoughtfully at the car as it drove away. "I wonder why things didn't work out with Mel. Adrian is so caring and open." She remembered her friend and decided to call her and tell her the news. Anticipating how happy Mel would be to hear that Olivia had given birth, how she would start asking questions, she dialed her friend's number. No one answered for a long time, and then she heard some unintelligible sounds. Olivia thought something was wrong with the connection and decided to call later.
On the day of discharge from the maternity hospital, Olivia and the baby were met by Adrian. Over the next few days, the young mum hadn't been able to reach Mel. At first, she was a little worried about why her friend didn't contact her, but then she decided that Mel had found a boyfriend again and was head over heels in a relationship. So she couldn't be bothered with Olivia. It wasn't just Olivia who was having a party. As soon as they heard the music, women in labour and other wards of the hospital leaned against the windows. In the courtyard of the hospital, the musicians were ready to play a touching song on command. Fountains of balloons and fresh flowers were set up around the hospital.
"What a celebration yours made for your discharge." The midwife shook her head approvingly. "A caring father, there aren't many like him nowadays. Most of them come drunk or, at best, hungover." Olivia didn't bother to reassure the doctor that it wasn't the baby's father. Why would she? It was a complete stranger, and she didn't need to know the details of the patient's personal life. For a moment, she thought about Kieran. Why fate was so cruel and he died without even recognizing that he had a son. It was a pity for Olivia, and that the grandmother wouldn't get to see her great-grandson.
"Look, are all the body parts in place?" jokingly asked the midwife, undressing the boy. "Here are the hands, here are the hands, here are the feet. There are 5 fingers everywhere. Look at him, he is smiling. He understands that he will go home with Mummy and Daddy."
The woman began to dress the newborn, and when she finished tying a beautiful bow on the envelope, she said, "Hold your happiness tight. Grow up healthy and come back for your second."
Olivia thanked the midwife, and they walked out onto the porch of the birthing center together.
At that moment, music came on and a handsome male baritone began to play. The love song moved Olivia so much that she even wept. Adrian walked over and embraced the baby. The staff was in tears at the touching scene, which was watched by the entire maternity ward. When the music finished, dozens of colorful balloons soared into the sky. "What did you name him?" Adrian asked, examining the boy by lifting the edge of the envelope. "Taylor," Olivia answered. "Taylor Swan." Adrian looked at her. At that moment, there was so much happiness and tenderness on Olivia's face that he couldn't resist hugging her. The driver with his camera jumped up in time to take a wonderful picture.
Olivia hadn't been able to reach Mel because she'd been out. She was in the hospital, the same hospital where Olivia had given birth, but 1 floor up, in the pathology department. "What's going on outside?" she asked her roommate when she heard the music. Mel couldn't get up and walk to the window. She had just been given an IV.
"Some of the young mothers are met by a happy and loving daddy," replied a neighbor in the ward, who was sitting on the windowsill and watching what was happening in the yard. "What, with an orchestra?" Mel wondered.
Hey, musicians, balloons, flowers. A happy woman who has such a husband. He'll probably carry her in his arms and give her child the best she sighed, stroking her bulging belly.
Where do men like that come from, Mel thought, thinking that Adrian would never do such a thing. All he wanted to do was dive into bed with her, enjoy himself like a young stallion, and not care what happened afterward. Mel didn't dare to tell Adrian that she was pregnant for a long time. She had relationships with different guys, but she always took care that there were no surprises and took birth control pills. But apparently she somehow managed to skip taking the pills, and one day a pregnancy test gave her a positive result. Damn it. She threw the test in the trash can in frustration. We have to solve this problem right away. She dialed the number of her friend who could help and arrange an abortion, but she didn't answer. Mel decided she would call later. Toward evening, Adrian called to say that he would be coming to see her tonight. He entered the hallway at 8 o'clock sharp. Mel's small apartment was instantly fragrant with the scent of expensive, refined perfume.
Did you miss me, my little hen? Adrian grabbed the girl by the waist and pulled her tightly against him. Missed you, of course, she said, smiling. You don't come so often lately. You've forgotten all about me. You'll forget you. The boy dragged her to bed, tearing off Mel's silk robe and underwear as he went.
Throwing her on the bed, he unzipped his pants. Take off your clothes properly, Mel said, panting with excitement and passion, but Adrian was on top of her, growling like a wild animal and roughly overpowering her again and again. When he shuddered and groaned and collapsed, pressing her into the soft, springy mattress, she whispered.
Why so rude? A tear rolled down Mel's cheek. She was hurt that Adrian had acted like a street whore, like he'd raped her.
He rolled over onto his back, adjusted his pillow, and said quietly, I'm sorry, something came up. Give me a cigarette. Mel reached for the pack.
Are you in trouble? She asked. The girl had already gotten to know Adrian's character very well. Sometimes he was rude to her, but more often he came to relax in her arms and complain about his unloved job, his failed military career, his overbearing father who decided everything for him.
No, Adrian replied. It's fine. I have something to tell you. Mel decided to tell Adrian that she was pregnant. There was a faint hope in her soul that the guy would want a child and marry her, or at least that they would raise the baby together. She agreed to it even without a wedding, without a stamp in her passport. Adrian took a drag on his cigarette and released a cloud of blue smoke from his mouth.
I just found out today, ... I'm pregnant. Well done, you've created a problem for yourself. Now you'll solve it, the guy said indifferently.
You got me pregnant. Mel rolled over onto her stomach and looked into his eyes.
Adrian was quiet for a moment, finished and put the cigarette out on the ashtray, then stood up and pulled on his pants.
Mel, I'm not a child and neither are you, he said, and the girl felt the metallic tones in his voice. You and I both know what we have in common. I never promised you anything, and I certainly never dreamed of having children with you. Adrian, but it happened. I didn't do it on purpose. She got it. The guy was buttoning his shirt. And how do you know it's me who got it, and not the other men you've been screwing around with?
Adrian, how can you do this?
Why? You think it's a secret to me that it's not just me you're spreading your legs in this bed? You're a whore, Mel. You're just a painted, brainless whore. You think anyone would want to have children with you? I can't even imagine you as a mother. What can you give your children?
I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I just wanted to tell you the news, because we have to decide what to do together. Mel got up from the bed and put her arm around Adrian's shoulders. I'm not forcing myself or this baby on you. I'll have an abortion and that's it. Just don't leave me. Adrian pushed her away, pulled several large bills out of his wallet and tossed them on the nightstand.
There should be enough here, he said, and walked out of the bedroom. A second later, Mel heard the door slam shut in the hallway. What an asshole, she thought, picked up her phone and dialed the number of the grocery delivery phone.
Hello, I'll have a pizza and a bottle of whiskey. Write down the address.
Adrian brought Olivia and the baby home. A security guard followed them up to the 4th floor of the girl's apartment, carrying heavy bags. Olivia was completely immersed in her thoughts. Even though she was happy, she had a lot of problems to solve: paperwork for her allowance, a call to the pediatric clinic, and a graduation coming up. "Is she asleep?" Adrian asked as Olivia entered the kitchen. He was taking groceries out of the bags and putting them in the refrigerator. "I've got a lot of stuff here, so I figured I'd have enough for a while, and then I'd bring you whatever you want. I also bought some baby stuff. I didn't know what I'd need." Olivia glanced at the bags of diapers, onesies, bottles. "Thank you. You're a big help." "It's because I love you, ... and your baby," Adrian said softly. The girl looked up at him. It seemed to her that Adrian was different now, different from before. Serious or something. "Olivia, trust me, it's going to be hard for you to raise a baby on your own. And I'll do anything for you. I've liked you since the first time I met you at the bus stop when we went on that picnic. But I couldn't tell you then. You realize. Adrian, you're kind, caring, sweet. I don't know what I'd do without you. But you know I don't love you."
It doesn't matter, as long as I love you. You'll never, ever regret believing me. I'm begging you, let's get married. I'll be a good father to Taylor. His father, as Kieran Olivia looked out the window and watched the children playing in the yard. Taylor would grow up to build sand towers in the sandbox.
It's sad and painful, but Kieran will never see his son. I can keep his memory alive, always telling Taylor what a hero his father is. And maybe you and I can still give Taylor a little brother or sister.
Feeling him come up behind her and touch her shoulder, Olivia turned, looking intently into Adrian's eyes.
"What about Mel?" the girl asked. "What will she say when she finds out?" Mel and I had never had anything serious, just meetings for fun. Neither she nor I ever loved each other. And anyway, Mel wasn't made to be a wife and mother, and you're different. A baby cried from the room. Olivia hurried to the baby, and Adrian sat down at the table and thought. It seemed to him that Olivia was about to agree to his proposal. They got married. They decided not to have a wedding or a big party, which upset Adrian's parents very much. But he was firm in his decision. "We have a young son, no time for weddings," Adrian said as he cut off to his parents. For a year, they'd been adjusting to each other. Adrian went out of his way to do everything for Olivia and Taylor. He bought expensive gifts and jewelry for his wife and toys for Taylor. Olivia saw her husband's efforts and was grateful, but every day she noticed more and more how much Taylor looked like Kieran. He had the same eyes, hair, even a smile. The girl never forgot her lover. Adrian saw it all, felt it all, and hoped that time would heal the wound and cover with the dust of oblivion the memories of his wife about Taylor's father. Olivia was walking with her son in the park one day. Taylor sat in his stroller, gazing around. He had a cookie in his hand. Olivia rolled the stroller down the alley. The girl came to this park often. There was no traffic noise, birds were singing, and she could always talk to other moms, just like her, walking with strollers. Suddenly, a tall, slender girl caught her attention. She staggered down the alley, sometimes falling, struggling to get up and walking again. Olivia quickened her pace a little. "Young lady, are you ill?" she shouted, approaching the stranger. And she collapsed back onto the paving stones, leaned on her arm and tried to get up. "Come on, I'll help you." Olivia held out her hand to the girl, and when she looked up, she recognized the stranger as her old friend. "Mel, what's the matter with you?" Olivia exclaimed in surprise. She helped her friend up, sat her down on a bench, and rolled the stroller with Taylor closer. Her friend was drunk. Her hair was strewn over her shoulders. Her clothes were dirty, and an arrow was crawling down her leg in black capron stockings. Mel recognized Olivia, looking at her with a hazy stare that reeked of alcohol. "You look good." "Thank you, Mel," Olivia said. "Why are you here like that? What happened to you?" "And a lot of things happened to me." Mel burst into a coarse, drunken laughter. "And you, and your Kieran, and my Adrian. A lot has happened to all of us." "What do you mean?" Olivia didn't understand. "Mel, are you sick? Do you need help?" "Help?" The girl opened her purse and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. She turned to Olivia and squinted her eyes. "You're the one who needs help, living in a fog and not noticing anything around you." "What are you talking about? Wake up, Mel, we were friends." "And I'm not friends with traitors. You betrayed everyone, me, Kieran. You know how bad I felt when you started living with Adrian. And you know how bad Kieran felt when you wouldn't even let him look at his son." "What the hell are you talking about?" Olivia didn't understand what her former friend was trying to accuse her of. "Do you have any money?" Mel asked her suddenly. "There's a card," replied Olivia. "Let's go." Mel struggled to get up from the bench and walk down the alley. Olivia followed her, rolling the stroller with her son in front of her, not wanting to let her go until she explained everything and told her about herself. They reached the nearest supermarket. "Give me the money," Mel said. Olivia handed her a bank card. Her friend entered the store and came out a short time later holding a bottle of alcohol. Soon they were sitting in the kitchen of Mel's apartment. Olivia was amazed at how messy the rooms were. There were things scattered everywhere, bottles, dirty dishes in the sink, and an ashtray full of cigarette butts on the windowsill. Mel took a glass and poured herself from the bottle. "I'm not offering you one. I know you won't," she muttered and raised her glass. "Cheers." "How did you come to this, Mel?" "Rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled. And you helped me ruin my life with Adrian. He told me you didn't have anything." Olivia tried to justify herself. "Well, of course, there's nothing but 2 kids." "What kids?" Olivia thought Mel had gotten drunk and was talking nonsense. But her friend got up from her chair and shuffled to her room, her torn tights shuffling across the floor. When she returned, she placed a photograph in front of Olivia. It showed 2 babies. They looked no more than 3 or 4 months old. "This is Ciara and Vincent. And their father Adrian," pointing her finger at the picture. Mel said, "My children, the twins." Olivia looked at the faces of the babies in surprise. They were lying on the beautiful blanket next to each other, looking exactly alike. "You had a baby with Adrian? When?" Olivia exclaimed in bewilderment. "Only 6 months ago. And that asshole didn't recognize the kids. And I had my parental rights revoked. With his connections, he made a quick deal and put the kids in an orphanage." Everything she'd heard from Mel seemed unbelievably crazy to Olivia. Adrian couldn't do that. Yes, he had connections, he could do a lot of things, but putting his children in an orphanage. "And then he wanted to kill me. He got me drunk and tried to strangle me, but Kieran wouldn't let him. He hit him so hard." Mel laughed, her laughter sounding unnatural, theatrical. "Kieran who? What are you talking about?" "I don't understand anything," Olivia said, and stopped drinking. She took the glass from her friend, catching an angry look. "Your Kieran punched him. Adrian was choking me and he punched him in the face." "Mel, wake up. Kieran died on a military trip." "No, he didn't. And he saw you." "Where? I beg you, pull yourself together and tell me everything in detail." It turned out that Kieran was back, and the first thing he did was to stop by his friend's house. As he approached the driveway, he saw Olivia and Adrian come out of the door. The guy had a small child in his arms. They smiled at each other, talked about something, and then got into the car and drove away. A few days later, Kieran decided to find out about Olivia and Adrian from Mel. He went to her house, knocked on the door, but no one opened it. In his heart, the guy banged on the door. It was unlocked. Entering, he heard the sounds of a struggle, ran into the bedroom where Adrian was choking Mel. Kieran punched him and pulled him away from the gasping girl. "Ah, he's back." Adrian, recognizing his old friend at once, said, "Hero, now you're going to get your rights, but your Olivia is no longer yours. She's my wife and we have a son growing up." Adrian pulled his passport out of his pocket and took out the picture that had been taken when he was discharged from the hospital. Olivia was smiling from the photo, and the boy was holding a newborn baby in his arms. As she listened to her friend's story, Olivia could hardly believe what was happening. It turned out that Kieran was not dead, as Adrian had told her. He was alive and knew nothing about his little son. "Give me a glass," Mel asked quietly, calming down. "I need a drink." Olivia moved the glass, watched silently as her friend poured the liquor into it, and then asked,
Why didn't you tell me?
"Don't you understand? I hated you with all my soul." "Where's Kieran now?" "He's probably gone. Who knows where he is?" Mel waved her hand uncertainly.
Why didn't he come to me, but went to Adrian first? He didn't mention it.
"Nope," the girl shook her head, pouring herself another. "I understand him, though. He's so handsome, proud, strong, and he'll come to you one-armed." "What do you mean, one-armed?" Olivia didn't understand anything at all. Everything Mel was telling her could have been the plot of a stupid show, like so many shows on TV nowadays. But it couldn't have happened in real life. And his arm was torn off on a business trip, Mel said, collapsed her head on the table and snored. The girl fell into a dead, drunken sleep. Returning home, Olivia wondered how to go on with her life. On the one hand, she has a strong family, a caring husband, a favorite son. On the other hand, Kieran, as it turned out, is alive, and he thinks that Olivia left him, preferring to live with Adrian. She was hurt that he hadn't made himself known, hadn't come to see her, but had appeared in front of Mel and a former friend. All day, thinking about how to live on, she decided that she would not change anything in her life. But Mila should be helped. 3 years had passed. Olivia and Adrian lived in a spacious apartment and raised Taylor together. The baby was growing up to be a very bright, active boy, constantly demanding attention. Olivia spent the whole day dealing with her son, and in the evening waited for her husband from work. Sometimes, looking out the window as he drove up to the entrance and parked the car in the yard, she thought that more caring than Adrian husband could not find. He spent all his free time with his wife and son, and last year they flew to Italy together. The doctors said it was good for the boy to breathe the healing air. For his 3rd birthday, Adrian gave Taylor a huge battery-powered car. The boy wasn't very good with the car, but he squealed with delight when his dad helped him steer it and race it down the long hallway. The whole family gathered to celebrate Taylor's birthday. Adrian's parents treated Olivia and her son calmly, not complaining, but every chance they got they had the pleasure of reminding her that she was an orphan and a dependent. Olivia didn't like it, and Adrian just waved it off, saying, "Never mind." Her husband's older sister often reproached Olivia for running around with her son like a piece of paper, and Adriana still hadn't given birth. As she set the table for the party, Olivia thought she would have to endure the reproaches, taunts, and sarcastic phrases directed at her again. Lately, she'd noticed more and more that Adrian himself was bringing up topics that insulted and offended his wife. Why he did so, she did not understand. When they were alone, more caring and affectionate Adrian could not imagine anyone. But in the presence of people who were strangers to Olivia, he always found something to pick on. And this time he was out of line. Olivia's taunts amused her in-laws. Everyone at the table seemed to be having fun except her. "Adrian, stop it. I feel bad," Olivia tried to stop her husband. But he went on. Then the girl could not stand it. Trying to appear calm, she smiled and said softly but very clearly, "The other day I went to the orphanage where your children live, honey. I looked at them, brought gifts and toys. You know, they're so cute. Why don't we take them for the weekend? The principal said it's possible." Adrian put his fork on the table silently, then slapped Olivia, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her out of the room. The family stared at them, uncomprehending. "You've scraped it all together, daughter-in-law, on your own head," said the mother-in-law sneeringly. The guests continued to eat as if nothing had happened, placing appetizers and salads on their plates. "Mom, what kids did Olivia say Olivia was talking about?" Sister Adrian suddenly asked. "Who knows who she is? She's got some nonsense in her head, so she's just saying whatever she wants. Andriusha only has Taylor." In the kitchen, Olivia wheezed, trying to free herself from her husband's strong, clinging fingers, which squeezed her neck. Adrian pinned her against the refrigerator and hissed, trying to keep his voice low so the family wouldn't hear. "Who do you think you are? You think you can tell my parents and sister whatever you want? Let go or I'll scream. I know all about you and Mel, about how you put your own children in an orphanage and stripped her of her maternal rights. About how you've been lying to me all these years. Shut up. Have you forgotten the swamp and poverty I pulled you out of? What would you be blaming your bastard for if it wasn't for me? My son is not a degenerate. He has a father and he's alive. That's something to remember. You should be grateful to me for the rest of your life. You've been living like a cheese and butter. Let go or I'll tell your parents. Adrian looked into her eyes with anger. He loosened his grip and finally let go of Olivia. She sat on the stool, rubbing her neck where her husband's fingers had left marks. How could you? You acted like a monster. It's none of your business. Mel's a whore. I never loved her. And the fact that I gave birth to her is something you have to prove. Already, Olivia said quietly. What? Adrian didn't understand what his wife meant. It's already been proven. Mel and I ordered a paternity test. Vincent and Ciara are your children. They're your blood twins. What kind of monster are you to throw your own babies out of your life? How could you deprive them of their mother? People like Mel can't be normal mothers. She's a slut and an alcoholic. What are you talking about? Didn't you do everything you could to make her drink? Didn't you want to kill her? Kieran's a witness. He'll testify that you strangled my friend to get rid of her. You can't prove anything. Suddenly, Adrian's eyes were aflame. No one would believe a degenerate alcoholic who'd been deprived of her parental rights.
You're wrong. Mel has been in treatment and hasn't been drinking alcohol for a long time. Olivia said triumphantly. She and I are almost finished with all the necessary paperwork. Soon she'll have her children back and she'll be happy. And I'm leaving you right now. I've had enough.
Stop. Adrian grabbed her hand and gripped the girl's wrist tightly with his fingers. Do you still want your relatives to know? Olivia looked boldly into his eyes, determined to tell her parents-in-law what their favorite son was really like. The guy let go of her hand, lowered his head. Go away and never come into my life again was all he said. On a May morning, Olivia and Mel were picking up the children from the orphanage. Vincent and Ciara were all dressed up. Mel had bought them nice suits and shoes, and she was getting excited. The day before, she and Olivia had cleaned up the apartment, setting up the nursery in Mel's former bedroom. Now there was a bunk bed, a closet full of children's things, and a large basket of toys. Mila had a very difficult time. When she learned what had happened in her life, Olivia began to visit her friend whenever she could get away from home. When she went for a walk with her son, she bought food to feed Milka, but she kept demanding alcohol. But long conversations, convincing her that only by stopping drinking, she could get her children back, did the trick. Mel agreed to treatment. For 2 months, she was in a private specialized institution, where Olivia paid for her treatment. When Mel was discharged, she didn't look like the cheerful, mischievous, flighty girl her friend had known her to be. Something was broken inside her. She kept thinking about the children, berating herself for the mistake she'd made in her life by letting Adrian send them to an orphanage. Olivia, on the other hand, convinced her every time that everything could still be brought back. She did everything she could to get Mel the twins. And so today they would settle into this room with new baby wallpaper and a big fluffy rug on the floor. Looking around the room, pleased that everything was working out so well, Mel said, "Thank you, Olivia, and I'm sorry if I hurt you in any way." "Don't thank me, we're friends." "It'll be okay." Olivia hugged her friend, who had recently been ready to fall into the abyss, to lose the most important thing in a mother's life, her children. "Mommy, will they let me play with toys?" Olivia asked Taylor. The girls laughed. "Of course they will," they replied almost in unison.
Well, shall we go? Mel said. We have to pick up some more cake and brownies.
Mel was happy that in just a few hours her apartment would be filled with children's laughter and happiness.
Walking home from Mel's, Olivia held Taylor's hand. They walked down the park alley that led to Olivia's house. The girl wondered how life might have turned out if she hadn't met Kieran in that park one day. Yes, she had been through a lot, but looking at the boy walking beside her, holding her hand tightly, Olivia was happy.
"What do you think of Ciara and Vincent?" she asked Taylor. "Good ones. Why were they living in an orphanage? They have a mom, Aunt Mel. It happens, Kid Olivia answered uncertainly. Taylor was a bright boy and understood a lot of things, but she thought it was hard to explain to a child why children were abandoned by their parents. When he grew up, he'd understand. After Olivia packed her bags and left Adrian on her son's birthday, his relatives repeatedly called her and threatened to take Taylor away. Her husband never dared to admit to his parents that Taylor wasn't his son. Well, then Olivia had to tell them herself. Tired of listening to the threats, she did just that. Taylor is not Adrian's son or your grandson, she told her mother-in-law. So leave us alone and don't call again. Adrian's mother yelled something else into the phone, that she would sue, take a DNA test, take the baby away from Olivia, but she just hung up. Olivia wanted nothing more to do with those people. Tomorrow she would take Vanya to Mila's. Her friend promised to stay with him for a couple of hours while Olivia was at the interview. The girl was going to get a job at the gymnasium. If everything went as Olivia planned, Taylor, as a child of an education worker, would be given a place in kindergarten. Life was getting better. As she thought about it, Olivia walked leisurely down the alley, holding her son's hand. Taylor snatched his hand out of hers and ran down the path. "Taylor, where are you going?" Olivia shouted after her. But the boy ran and ran. He saw a beautiful butterfly and rushed after it. Suddenly, the child stumbled and fell with all his might on the paving stone path. Olivia rushed to her son's aid. She saw a strange man come to the child, lift him up and put him on his feet. "Son, you're all right," she ran over to the boy and squatted down to examine the wound on his knee, which was visible through his torn pants. "How could it be? How many times have I told you not to run?" She suddenly realized that a man had helped the boy up and thanked him without even looking in his direction. "Thank you so much for helping my son." "You're welcome, because that's my son too. How you doing, fighter?" Olivia slowly raised her eyes to the stranger who had come to her child's rescue. Her heart was pounding frantically. She stood up, not taking her eyes off his face. Kieran looked at her with the same kind, loving velvet eyes. "Hello, Olivia," he said quietly. "I've been waiting for you here for a long time." Kieran ... Love. Olivia couldn't believe her eyes. Taylor's father was standing in front of her, the man she loved most in her life. "I thought I'd never see you again. I thought you'd never come back." "How could I not come back? I promised you, remember? I promised you there, at the campground, surrounded by centuries-old pines, in our cabin, where we loved each other so much." "I remember everything, and I never forgot," Olivia said quietly. "Let's go home." The three of them walked down the park alley toward the exit. Kieran held his son with one hand. But Olivia didn't care that her boy's father had come back crippled. The important thing was that now they would always be together.